and welcome to the Rochester Community Schools Board of Education regular meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order at 6 p.m. Tonight we have actually 4 students from the West Middle School 7th grade quartet, Sophie, Lucy, Clara, and Jilly, who will be performing our national anthem. Take it away, ladies. And if you could please stay standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for being here this evening. I love seeing so many red shirts out there. This Board of Education regular meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education and in the public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not a public community meeting. However, there is a time for public participation during the meeting. General public comment will be heard under agenda item 9.1, and community members may make comments prior to a vote on any action item. If you wish to speak tonight and have not already filled out a yellow card, they are located on a table near the entrance to the media center, which is my left and would be most of your rights. Once you've completed the card, please hand it to the Safe Ed officer in a yellow shirt. Please note that cards must be completed prior to speaking. I will call the names of those who I have a card for during public comment. When addressing the board, you will have 3 minutes to speak. We will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please be mindful of this time limit. We also ask that when you address the board, to please state your name and your relationship to the district and address your comments to the entire board and not to individual board members, school district employees, or to members of the audience. The board will not be responding to comments or questions during the meeting. However, someone will follow up if needed. We also reserve the right to exclude from our meeting an individual who engages in conduct that constitutes a breach of the peace. To my board colleagues, I would like to remind everyone to please be respectful of each other and our administrators. The specific language can be found under Board Bylaws 0139.5 and 0139.6. On behalf of my colleagues on the board, we are grateful to be able to serve this community, and we truly appreciate your support. Now moving on to item 2, we have roll call. All members are present with the exception of President Butel, who is absent with notice. Item number 3 is the approval of our agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
We have Trustee Gupta. Is there a second? Okay, support. Trustee Alsbach. Is there any discussion? Trustee Weaver.
I'd like to make a motion to add a discussion item about student-led walkouts.
Okay. Is there support for this? Trustee Lakui. Okay. What specifically you want to include? Can you repeat that, please?
I'd like to make a motion to add a discussion item about student-led walkouts.
Okay. Since you made the motion, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yep. Based on current events and the rise in student walkouts and our past history in our district of allowing them and being condoned and supported by the district, I think it's appropriate for us to have an open discussion about what happened today so that we as trustees can start identifying what we might need to do from a policy standpoint to address it.
Okay. Would anyone like to speak to this motion? Trustee Blake.
Sure, I'll address that. We were emailed about this before, so I did know about this, and I looked this up. I don't think this is something that we need to add to the agenda because I don't think it's an emergent issue just because something happened today. We do have a policy, a code of conduct that covers unexcused absences. So if a student leaves their class unexcused, there are certain consequences that they face, and they, as I understand, knew that. Whether they leave to go to the mall or whether they leave to have a protest, it shouldn't be any different. We also have a committee that is looking into this right now, into adding a number of things, and this is one thing.
Point
And
of
in
order.
addition,
Yes.
Point of order, this isn't addressed, this is part of the conversation.
Yeah.
this is part of why we shouldn't need to do this tonight. We have all the guidance we need through our current policy. We also have the United States Supreme Court, which has ruled on the issue of students' rights within schools, and I can read from this opinion
Point
if
of
we
order,
get to
this
that.
is still about whether or not we should add the discussion
Right.
to the agenda.
Well, I'll just simply say we have adequate guidance for this. We don't need to add this as an emergency.
So you will not be in support of this?
I will not be.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Trustee Lakui.
If there's a desire to talk about it, I have presented something that the Policy and Curriculum Committee is currently reviewing, although we have no idea how long it will take for us to get through that process. If people want to discuss ideas or add changes, then they're more than welcome if you'd like to add the discussion to the agenda.
Any other comments? Any other feedback? No? I will take those in favor? And those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Okay. That's a 4-2. The motion to amend the agenda does not pass. The motion on the floor is to adopt the agenda as presented. Is there any other discussion? Okay. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And those opposed? All right, that's a 6-0 vote. The agenda is approved as presented. The next item on the agenda is item number 4, Spotlight on Success. And our Spotlight on Success this evening will be highlighting our athletic trainers and our partnerships with them. And Mr. Josh Rinkle will be presenting this. Take it away, Josh.
Joining me is also Brian Shelson, principal of Stony Creek High School, and Pasquale Kuzmano, principal of Adams High School. Rochester Community Schools is proud to offer extensive extracurricular opportunities to our students, including a wide variety of sports. Our board spotlight this evening honors the efforts of the dedicated athletic trainers at all 3 high schools. These highly trained healthcare professionals work through a partnership with Ascension Providence Hospital in support of our Highlander, Falcon, and Cougar athletes. At this time, we invite our athletic directors to share a few words about the important work of our trainers. Please welcome Shane Holler from Adams High School, Dean Allen from Rochester High School, and Brian Anderson from Stony Creek High School. We also welcome our partner, Michael Chan, who is the program manager for sports medicine at Ascension.
Rochester Community Schools is grateful for the service of our dedicated athletic trainers who prioritize the well-being of our student athletes, providing health and safety support across our high schools. At this time, we'd like to recognize our exceptional athletic trainers. First, from Adams High School, Morgan St. Henry. New to Rochester this year, Michaela Wilkie. And from Stony Creek, Sydney Holland. Morgan, Michaela, and Sydney are the highly qualified healthcare professionals who serve 72 MHSAA varsity teams and over 120 junior varsity and freshman teams in Rochester Community Schools. Their extensive education and training have prepared them for the broad range of injuries, illnesses, and challenges that may be experienced by our student athletes.
Our athletic trainers support individuals through injury prevention, clinical assessment, emergency intervention, and injury care. They are generally the first point of contact on site where injuries or illnesses occur. In partnership with administrators, coaches, and players, they provide a safe environment for all athletic activities and competitions. We truly appreciate their commitment to the overall health and well-being of each student athlete.
Off the court and field of play, and during the off-season, our athletic trainers work with student athletes to provide therapeutic interventions that may prevent injuries and help facilitate the healing process. With a focus on wellness, our athletic trainers help minimize disruptions and contribute to academic success for our students, who have convenient access to professional health care resources at the school. They may also help in the coordination of care with physicians and medical providers. We are proud of this partnership with Ascension to provide seamless service to our student athletes.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the Board of Education for honoring our athletic trainers tonight. It's a wonderful recognition. Ascension is proud to be the exclusive healthcare providers for Rochester Community High Schools. Along with our athletic trainers and our nurse practitioner who serves as a district nurse, we're proud to be able to provide high-quality healthcare professionals to the district and the local community. So to the athletic trainers, congratulations on a job well done. Thank you.
Any board comments? Thank you so much. We appreciate the partnership with Ascension.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're on to number 5, communications. This is where we reference various communications that have been received by the board. 5.1, the Secretary of Board of Education, Trustee Gupta. Would you like to give us an update?
Sure. So at this time, we have received 5 communications, which are all in the packet for reference.
Thank you. Any other, sorry, jumping ahead here. Let's see, 5.2, student representatives for the board. This agenda item is where we receive an update from our really fabulous student representatives about what is happening in each of the high schools, and we will start off with Adams High School with Lauren Cromie. Take it away, Lori. Or Lauren, sorry.
All right, hello everyone. I only have a couple things to highlight on behalf of Adams this evening. To start, on Thursday, November 30th, to honor and support Oxford High School, the 3 high schools changed their social media profiles to be Oxford Strong Graphics. We encourage students to wear blue. Our thoughts and or prayers remain with the entire Oxford community and all of those touched by this tragedy. On the following day, December 1st, our students and staff at Adams dedicated the month of December for our beloved Highlander teacher, Mr. Mullins, who passed away on December 2nd of last year. Mr. Mullins was known for his kindness and love of giving to others, so we've dedicated this month to be Acts of Kindness and Gratitude Month, to remember and be grateful for all we have at Adams. His memory will live on forever in the hearts of several Highlanders and the RCS community as a whole. The following week, on Monday, December 4th, our Highlander staff engaged in Professional Development Day. During PD in the afternoon, Adams staff focused on making sure every Highlander has a trusted adult similar to Mr. Mullins. The staff also had time to work in departments focusing on teaching and learning. Looking ahead, we are looking forward to our Highlander holiday bands, orchestra, and choir concerts all this week at Adams. Winter sports are up and running. Along with this, I'd like to wish all DECA members good luck at this Saturday's Regional 7, District 7 competition. Next, a new potential tradition is blooming thanks to certain students in Adams High School's Student Council, where Adams students will be attending an elementary feeder school and building bonds with RCS kids as they read holiday stories and make crafts. Along with this, the school will be continuing our annual Holiday Spirit Week. Thank you so much, and on behalf of all Highlanders, have a happy holidays.
Thank you, Lauren. Next up, we have from Rochester, Kate Soriano. Thanks, Kate.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here tonight, and RHS is really feeling the holiday spirit this season, and I'm so excited to share it with you all. We had our holiday hoops game last Friday against Adams, which had a big turnout, but more importantly, it was our Toys for Tots drive, which we were able to collect a significant amount to help give back to the community kids for the holidays. Also, on the 29th of December, the Rochester United hockey team is holding their annual Brendan Santo Memorial Game at Suburban Ice at 8:30 in order to support his life and legacy. We also recently had our senior class coffee house event in which a variety of students of all grades performed their talents. We had saxophones, piano, singing, and even stand-up. Students were able to sit and watch the show with coffee and treats in hand. It was a lovely event, perfect for the upcoming holidays and great fundraising for the senior class. RHS will also have our annual winter concert on the 20th at 7 p.m. with our concert band, symphony band, and wind ensemble. Our marching band has also been very busy performing at the parades around Rochester. Just yesterday, they made an appearance at the Caroling in the City event, which was amazing to watch. HOSA is also competing in the regional competition this weekend at Troy High School. All students have different events they present, and they also have tests and performance-based tasks they have to complete. Good luck to them. RHS is getting ready for the holiday with our upcoming Holiday Spirit Week. We have spirit days like our annual Ugly Sweater Day, Jingle Bell Rock Day where you dress like a rock star, and 'Twas the Day Before Break where you wear pajamas. We're also doing our annual Candygram selling where you write a note to a special someone with a candy cane, which always gets people excited for the holidays. Also, we have our hot cocoa sales in the morning, even if it's still 50 degrees outside. Also, it's also Transportation Week and Transportation Appreciation Week, and RHS wants to thank all of our bus drivers for all they do for our students. Almost every one of our students has ridden the bus throughout high school, and even if a student doesn't take the bus regularly, I'm sure they all have benefited from our transportation staff. Our district wouldn't know what to do without all of your dedication to our kids and all your hard work. Thank you for all that you do. Have a happy holiday.
Thank you, Kate. Next up from Stony Creek is Dawson Boomers.
Good evening. As holiday break comes near, the excitement and cheer has taken over Stony Creek. Today, student council members set up our giving tree in the senior bank of our school. Families can donate gift cards and put an ornament on the tree to participate. Students who donate can also receive a ticket to our Cookies and Cocoa event, which will be held this Wednesday, where students can spend time with friends decorating cookies and sipping hot cocoa. Since all of our proceeds go to help Stony Creek families, this tree acts as a reminder of the importance of giving back and helping our community. We have also begun getting the word out about our upcoming Holiday Spirit Week. Monday, we will have PJ Day. Tuesday, Skier versus Surfer. Wednesday is our Winter Whiteout. Thursday is our Snowflake Showdown school-wide rock, paper, scissors competition. And Friday is our classic Ugly Sweater Day. Along with our Spirit Week, the PTSA is eager to celebrate our amazing staff by organizing a holiday lunch the Thursday before break. Deaf Santa was hosted by members of the Stony Creek ASL program to bring the magic of the holidays to the deaf community last weekend. Santa communicated strictly in sign language, and students shared their Christmas lists, played games, and made crafts and enjoyed lunch. Our theater company is hard at work with both their student-directed one act and with beginning lead role auditions for our spring musical. Our dance team has also had an amazing start to their season and scoring first place in their game day division and receiving the overall high score with their jazz routine at their competition 2 weeks ago. Following Rochester's lead, Stony has begun our trial period for Advisory Hour. Students have been very appreciative of the extra time allotted to catch up on homework, meet with teachers, or get ahead in our classes. With finals coming up in these next few weeks, this trial period could not be in better timing. Thank you for the time and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Dawson. Next up from the IA is Tarek Taskin.
Good evening, everyone. This is Tarek from International Academy. This year, we are excited to be starting a ski and snowboard club at IA. Next Monday, December the 18th at 3:30, we are happy to be hosting Sip and Study for midterms and a comfy pajama spirit day as well. This past Saturday, our Science Olympiad teams competed at Northview Invitational in Ohio. There were 56 teams present for the competition. Several teams placed in the top 8 and earned medals for their events. Our varsity Codebusters team won first place. Our students participated in a Model UN conference this weekend, and 4 of our students won specific awards, including highest honors. IA is busy preparing for midterms next week before break. Thank you and happy holidays.
Thank you, Tarek. Next up, we have item under communication, item 5.3, citizens requesting placement on the agenda. Tonight, we have 3 citizens who have requested placement on our agenda: Stephanie Van Dale, Vito Pamploma, and Tara Donnelly. If anyone is interested in requesting placement in the future, there is a form under the Board of Education on our website. Those requests are due by noon, 3 business days prior to our meeting, which would be the Wednesday before a Monday night board meeting. As a reminder, when addressing the board, please state your name and your relationship to the district. Please address your comments to the entire board and not to individual board members, school district employees, or members of the audience. The board will not be responding to comments or questions during the meeting. However, someone will follow up if needed. And Mrs. Van Dale, could you please come forward to the mic?
My name is Stephanie Van Dale, and you know my relationship to the district. Now, at a previous time, the secretary would have summarized what had been said, but I wrote a letter to this board, and I feel that it's important that I read it to you so that you understand what's going on. I've seen some pretty dysfunctional things from the board, but the last Monday has got to go down in the books as tell me you're a piece of work without telling me you're a piece of work. First, Trustee Gupta. Wow, I can see you've never gotten past high school.
Excuse me, Mrs. Van Dale, you're
This
supposed
is
to
my letter and
direct
it's
your
public
comments
record.
to the entire
Whatever.
board and not
Whatever.
one
Your
individual.
victim mentality was on full display.
What is that? Point of order. Vice President, you cannot restrict the First Amendment right of our speakers. Let them speak without interrupting them in the future.
Your victim mentality was on full display during your comments at the end of the night. Oh yes, everything Trustee Weaver says or does is aimed directly at you. Please, like previous speakers at the podium have said, go back and watch the reels. You look through a lens of skepticism every single time Trustee Weaver writes anything at all. You are named by him because you follow the DEI narrative and you're a public figure. You walk right into it, get over yourself. If you do not want to be a public figure, then step down. I'm sure the other majority members can find someone who thinks just like you, just like Trustee Bull said at one point in time. You complain about Trustee Weaver not bringing forth policies, yet whenever he makes one single suggestion to language or nuance like he did when working on clarifications for policies on appointees, the majority members shut him down with their talons and fangs. You don't get it. That is what the work sessions are for. Please just resign. You're nothing but a hindrance in getting this district back to its stellar reputation. The teacher who spoke on Monday was correct. RCS was once the Yankees. RCS is now the 2008 Detroit Lions. Please resign. Second, Trustee Annis. It was so disgusting of you to say, it's not what you ask, but how you ask. It's how you approach the subject matter. Unbelievable. You have a lot of, shall say, chutzpah to say that. Julie Stalker's been asking board members nicely for years, upon years, upon years, to change the literacy curriculum. She has produced volumes of data and printed it out and handed it to you in bag binders of proof that the reading curriculum of this district sucks. She has invested blood, sweat, and tears trying to get the board to do its job. Choose the correct curriculum. Look at Josh Raymond. He's asked nicely for years. Look at Tara Donnelly.
Your time is up. Thank you.
I
Thank you
could
for your
name more
comments, Mrs.
people,
Van
but
Dale.
you know what I mean.
Mr.
Asking
Pamplona.
nicely doesn't work with people
Mr.
like
Pamplona,
you.
you're welcome to come next to the mic. Thank you.
Point of order. Next time you interrupt someone, though, you need to stop their time so they get their full 3 minutes. Interrupting them, you should not be taking their 3 minutes.
Thank you for that advisement. I'll take it under.
No, you won't. You're a bitch.
Oh, get out. You need to leave. Don't use that language, please. You need to leave, Stephanie.
No, I'm not leaving. No.
It is a breach of the peace. You need
Oh,
to leave.
it's a breach of the peace. You know what? Get a cop after me.
Mr. Pamplona, you can come forward to the mic, please. Thank you.
Good evening. I
Good
have
evening.
something really special to bring to the board today. What I have in my hand here is copies of Christmas cards that the Stony Creek High School football team, Coach Merlot, put together, about over 80 of them. I'll pass these out so you can kind of see them. They were the ones that we sent were very high stock. These are just copies. And these are Christmas cards that are going to be hand-delivered this Wednesday to all the wounded veterans at Walter Reed National Army Medical Center. This is a tradition that I started in 2003, working with our wounded veterans right after the Iraq War started. They call it the Uncle Vito Christmas Party. I'm very proud of that. But I'm so proud of the young men and women and the young football team and Coach Merlot and all his assistant coaches on what they've done. They made those cards, and you can see the quality of what they did. Actually, they were very heavy stock, and it's got the logo and the football team. And I'm going to read a couple of them just to give you a flavor of what's in them. Dear veteran, I just wanted to say thank you for your service. Thank you for fighting, pushing back against danger to our country and our people. As a football player, I know how to handle adversity, but I know that it's not really as much as you had to deal with. During the week of our cause game, we listened to stories about being a veteran, from the veterans, some being our own coaches. It was great watching our varsity team fight on the football field for all of you and put up a great battle. That week and an experience changed my point of view on veterans, and it makes me have a tremendous amount of respect for you, especially learning that my grandfather was a veteran. Thank you for your perseverance and dedication for keeping our country safe. That comes, let me read one more real quick. I'm truly grateful for your service. Without the military, as football players wouldn't be able to enjoy the sport we love. Serving this great country in the military is something I may not be able ever to do. Putting your life at risk for the innocent people deserves the most respect. This season we have a cause game where we played for the U.S. veterans. And all of these are like that. And as a veteran, a disabled veteran myself, it warms my heart. It warms my heart to see our young people embracing what's going on. And they're learning something else at school. Patriotism, sacrifice, obligation, commitment, cause, discipline, respect. These are things you don't read in a book, but things I'm proud to say our school district and Coach Merlot and his people are teaching these young people. And I appreciate it and know the veterans do too.
Thank you. Next up, we have Tara Donnelly.
I don't know how to follow the previous two speakers. So, good evening. My name is Tara Donnelly, and I'm the boring last speaker in this public comment section. I'm here to talk about an issue. I'd like to express my concerns about the IT department, and on September 1st, two very well-liked employees with long tenures left RCS. One retired and one resigned. At the end of the same month, two more IT employees resigned, so in total, 4 IT employees left RCS in less than 30 days. Those departures alone are a problem, but when you combine those departures with the audit that Mr. Silveri initiated back in October, that's a red flag about the IT department. One of the 5 vendors included in the audit is Linder Technology Group Incorporated, LTGI. So I have to point out the elephant in the room here and say that the owner of LTGI shares the same last name as the IT department manager. So that raises more questions. First, what prompted the mass exodus of IT employees in September and what's being done to address it? Second, what is the relationship between the IT department manager and LTGI? Based on the RCS page, LTGI provided over $42,000 of services to RCS since 2017. I don't know if RCS hired LTGI before 2017 because this information isn't publicly available on the RCS transparency link. Third, how did RCS select LTGI to provide these services? Was there a competitive bidding process that included at least 3 vendors? Who ultimately approved these invoices? I'm not a purchasing expert, but other industries and other school districts do have purchasing policies that prohibit hiring vendors that are owned and operated by spouses or family members of employees due to potential conflicts of interest. Finally, when will we have an update on the audit? We were supposed to hear back from the CPA firm on October 31st, and today is December 11th. So I'd like to thank you. I apologize for the boring comment in comparison to the other 2, but wish all of you a good holiday season.
Thank you.
Madam President?
Yes, Trustee Lukui.
Do we have an update on when the audit results will be coming from the YO audit?
I'm sure that might be something that the interim superintendent, Mr. Silveri, can give us when it's his turn to speak in his update. Right now, we're going to move on to...
Madam President?
Madam, yes.
Do we know what the relationship is between the owner of...
I cannot answer that question for you. So when we get to the point in the agenda where the the interim superintendent can address comments, he will answer your questions.
Madam President, could we ask him right now to just address that particular
No, we're not that
question?
point. We are not at that point on the agenda.
Madam
We
President?
are now, yes, Trustee Lukui.
The reason I ask right now is because I've asked questions before where I was hoping for answers in updates, but truly the updates are for us to talk about whatever it is that we would like to talk about. So they don't necessarily answer specific questions, but given the questions that we just heard raised, I would like to know when are we receiving that update and do we know the relationship? Could we ask the interim superintendent right there to answer some of those questions?
He will give an update when it is his time on the agenda. And we're going to move on to item 5.4, members of the Board of Education. This is the section where members of the Board of Education share communication that were shared directly with them and were not sent to the full board. Did any board member receive communication from the public? Trustee Blake.
I received 2 communications directly, one from Kimberly Lopez about literacy curriculum and her child's experience with that and her desire that we make a change in our program. I also heard from Julie Stalker with information about phonics and literacy.
Thank you. Anyone else? Trustee Weaver.
I received 2 communications. One, I will not use the person's name because they asked for that to stay anonymous because they are in fear of retaliation. They received feedback that their grandchild was not able to dress in vintage clothing when they went to the Van Heusen farm field trip. They did share communication that they reached out to the Van Heusen farm and said that communication had to have come from RCS because it's not their policy. So that they were very concerned about why that would be a policy because it does not listed in our dress code anywhere that that's not allowed. But again, the fear of retaliation would be taken against their grandchild if it became known who they were. Second one I had was from a Kaylin. They reached out to share some past communication they've had around safety with the Oxford report coming out. Throughout their feedback, they were very open that they do believe that things should be done at the state level, but stressed that we as a board should focus on what's in control at our local level, and I could not agree with them more.
Anyone else? I actually received a communication from Carrie Lawton regarding some issues about an individual who's driving around the bus when it is in her community being picked up, and I've passed that on to other officials within our district, and they'll be following up with her. Next on the agenda, we have item 5.5, PTA Council Update, and Jamie Radcliffe will be giving this update. Jamie, thank you.
Good evening. Last week, our school PTAs submitted 210 student entries that had placed in the top 2 in each category for their school to move on to the district level Reflections Art Competition. In March, those students who placed in the top for our district will be honored, as well as those who received recognition at the state level. Plans are moving along for the PTA Council Founders Day, which is a celebration of those parents, teachers, staff, and students who have gone above and beyond for their school communities through their work with the PTA. The theme for this year is Above and Beyond, and we received a record 41 submissions from students for the logo contest. Sophia Karras, Stony Creek Jr. won the logo contest, and her design will be featured on the event's pins, programs, and more. The 8 honorees who are receiving district-level awards have been selected. Not all have been notified yet, but I'm honored to share that Kim Kelly, who has served as a PTA president in our district for 9 years, has been selected as the winner of this year's John Schultz Leadership Award for her years of service to PTA at Musson, Van Hoosen, and Adams. The John Schultz Leadership Award is the highest award a PTA volunteer can receive in our district. Adams High School will be hosting the second Battle for Battle of the Books later this week. Students from all of our high schools compete in this trivia contest, which includes 3 separate battles in November, December, and January, followed by a finale event in February where the students will get a chance to hear from one or more of this year's authors. And finally, our council STEM team is working on a Support a project which will be released soon. Funds will help support the creation of BristleBot robot kits that can be used at all of our elementary PTAs to host STEM events at their own buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Next, we have a PAC update. Melissa Hoffman will be providing that for us. Thank you, Melissa.
Good evening. I'm Melissa Hoffman. I'm chair of the Special Education Parent Advisory Committee for Rochester Community Schools. Our November meeting was held November 28th at Ruther Middle School. We were joined by Board Trustee Barb Annis and Principal Wendy Darga, as well as by our special education administrative staff. Mrs. Darga was proud to share about the culture of Ruther, which houses our entire middle school cognitively impaired and secondary severe multiple impairment programs. The students take specials with their general education peers and share time in the classroom as well. Mrs. Blizzard, teacher for the cognitive impairment program, was excited to share about their recent second annual classroom Thanksgiving celebration, where they invited friends from their general education classes to join together. This has become a Ruther tradition, and they hope to continue. Trustee Annis updated us on the district's strategic plan process and superintendent search, as well as her upcoming trip to Washington to once again fight for the full funding of the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, one more time. Updates from our special ed administrators included concern for the future of special ed teachers and a discussion on programs such as Talent Together, which allows districts to procure their own talent. We hope to have more information on that soon. ATPS was excited to share the success of local advocacy in our area, which led to the successful expansion of smart bus routes in areas between Auburn Hills and Royal Oak beginning this spring, which will lead to increased independence for those with disabilities. The Oakland Schools PAC recently did a presentation on special needs summer programs. If your child has specific needs for summer, it is absolutely not too soon to start thinking about what that will look like. Please reach out to us with questions for resources, visit our website, and also reach out to the special ed department. ESSER funds are still available for a limited time to cover pandemic learning loss for both tutoring and social emotional programs such as day camps and summer schools for those with IEPs. On December 6th, we held an overview of services at Stony Creek with the ARC of Oakland County. They discussed programs such as Special Needs Trust, Social Security, ABLE accounts, independent living, forever plans, and more. If you missed it and would like to learn more, feel free to make an appointment directly with the ARC of Oakland County. The PAC also wishes to congratulate the Stony Creek American Sign Language, which was the club, I believe it was, which was mentioned earlier by our students, on their recent Sign Language Santa events. Families came from all over the Metro Detroit area to experience this special event. It looked phenomenal, and we just wanted to say we're so proud of you guys. This position on the PAC is, as PAC chair, is 3 years. Excuse me. So as we near the end of 2023, I'm also about halfway through this position. And I'm learning that this is an especially tough time of year for our families because it's when we've really started to get a handle on the challenges that our kids are dealing with. And we've just begun to address them, but we really haven't had enough time to dig in. So this job is challenging, and I often feel the weight of it and the weight of our families, but it truly has been my honor to serve the families of our community. And I also wanted to take a moment to thank all of you, the board, our administrators, for allowing us to become a regular part of these meetings. It can be easy to take for granted that special education students are just a part of all of students, and they are, but I truly appreciate your recognition that we need a voice of our own as well, so thank you. Families in need of special ed support are always encouraged to reach out to us. All general PAC meetings are public. Parents of IEP and 504 students are always encouraged to attend our meetings, as well as interested staff. Our next meeting is January 23rd at Stony Creek High School in the Media Center at 7 p.m. We hope you can join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. We appreciate the partnership with PAC as well. Next up, item 5.7 is the DEIPN update, and Mr. Albert Rush will be providing that update. Mr. Rush?
Thank you. Thank you, Board. My name is Albert Rush. I'm part of the DEIPN leadership team. DEIPN invites the community to an educational event this Wednesday, December 13th, here at West Middle School in the Media Center from 7 to 8:30 p.m. We'll be learning and practicing the 10 things allies can do this Wednesday. This Wednesday's meeting is designed to teach adults what allyship involves and a chance to practice having some uncomfortable conversations. An ally is someone who helps and supports other people who are part of a group that is treated badly, unfairly, although not themselves being a member of that group. We'll be discussing how to be supportive in many different groups, including, but not limited to, race, gender, orientation, religion, and disability. This promises to be a session where attendees will walk away with information and actions that can be put to use immediately, as well as actions for future growth in our journey to becoming a welcoming and inclusive community member. Everyone is invited, even if you don't have a student in the district. As a follow-up, our January meeting will be information about conversations around how caregivers can teach children to become allies to their peers. DEIPN remains committed to our vision to helping create and sustain a district-wide culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging throughout the myriad ways educational opportunities are being one of them. Please contact us at rcsdeipn@gmail.com or follow us on Facebook at Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Parent Network _DEIPN. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rush. Next up on the agenda is item 6. That is our consent agenda. Agenda item 6.0 regards all matters listed under the consent agenda are considered routine in nature by the Board of Education and will be acted upon by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If any member of the board or any citizen requests discussion of an item, that item will be removed. Please note that we have made a change on how we handle items that have been asked to be removed. The items removed will now be discussed separately under the consent agenda and will retain the same number. For instance, if item 6.1 was asked to be removed, we would vote on item 6.2 through 6.4, and then we would come back to item 6.1 for a motion, discussion, and vote. Keep in mind that you may still request just one item on a report to be removed from the consent agenda. If this is the case, we would approve everything else, and the item removed from the report would receive a new number. In this case, it would be 6.5, but still under the consent agenda. The reason for this change is to make it easier for everyone to follow the agenda that has been posted for community members to identify what item they want to comment on and for our recording company to be able to accurately reflect where we are on the agenda. Our consent agenda tonight consists of item 6.1, current bills payable for November 1st, 2023 through November 30th, 2023 in the amount of $19,465,479.91. Item 6.2, human resource recommendations. Item 6.3, Board of Education closed meeting minutes, November 27th, 2023. Item 6.4, Board of Education regular meeting minutes, November 27th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
I have so moved by Trustee Gupta. Any support? Support from Trustee Alsbach. Board discussion. Yes.
Madam President, I'd like to have 6.1 and 6.4 pulled.
Okay. We will be pulling 6.1 and 6.4 pulled from the consent agenda. Any other board discussion? Okay, seeing none. Actually, is there, well, let's vote first on item 6.2 and 6.3 under the consent agenda. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that is a 6-0 vote. Okay, now we will go back to item 6.1, current bills payable. And Trustee Weaver, you've asked to move it. Can you please state why?
So I did have this one pulled, so again, so I can reiterate to the community why I abstained from voting on these. At this point, we still have many unanswered questions, very simple questions for invoices, questions around them. At this point, it is just not appropriate for any trustee to vote on expenditures without knowing what we are voting on. So again, that is why I abstained from voting on these.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Trustee Lukui.
I will also need to abstain from this vote as we don't approve these bills before they're paid. And I've received no answers about my concern that our financial controls are so loose that they're allowing us to disperse cash to people or companies without requiring proper invoices or written documentation. We discussed this at the last board meeting, and at that last meeting, our interim superintendent made it clear he's not intending to pursue a complete answer to this question, but he did suggest that if trustees want to present it or prevent it from happening in the future, that they could propose a policy that might help. So I intended to propose a policy at this meeting, and I requested a copy of our existing financial controls and any definition we might be using currently for an invoice so that if I propose a policy, there are no conflicts or unforeseen problems with that. Unfortunately, I did not get those materials in time. I'm not able to do that, and I'm disappointed. The lack of urgency in this matter is concerning to me.
Thank you for sharing your opinion. Any other board colleagues have comments on this? Oh, I'm sorry, Trustee Blake.
So my first meeting in October, I raised the fact that I did think that we needed to be able to get access to invoices in advance of meetings. I raised that in November at a meeting, and now we're in December at a meeting. And I've been told that we are working on that's in process. I don't know what that means. I'm going to need a little more information, and I will vote for this tonight, but I cannot indefinitely keep approving invoices when we don't have access to them.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Any other comments? Seeing none, we do, Mrs. Van Dale, did you want to comment? You have minutes on your card. Did you want to wait, or did you want to comment now regarding this?
I'll comment now.
Okay. The next item that was pulled was 6.4, regular meeting minutes for the Board of Education, November 27, 2023.
So I find it ironic that, none of you really like when I come up here. None of you like me up here either, but I have a First Amendment right to speak as I want to, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to use my 3 minutes to speak, and everybody in a red shirt can just calm down, especially you. You don't need to point at me. I'll point at you if I want to. Just shut your mouth. Now, I find it ironic that in the minutes under 9.1 for members of Board of Education, there's 3 lines for Trustee Blake, and 4 lines for Trustee Gupta, and 4 lines for Trustee Anus, and 4 lines for Michelle. But there's just 1 for Trustee Weaver that he addressed mental health. And I don't find that to be consistent and fair. And there's only 1 for Trustee LeCouey. So I don't find it to be fair or inclusive or any of those other key words when he sat there for 2 to 3 minutes talking about what is going on with mental health with our kids, and he could only be summarized by whoever takes these notes as Weaver addressed mental health. That's a big thrill. And LeCouey addressed district spending and board oversight. I feel that
30
whoever
seconds.
takes these notes needs to be a little bit better at taking notes and concise stuff, concisely writing what they did, because I really, really don't care about, whether you were at Sip, Savor, and Shop. That's not what I care. I want to know what Weaver said about mental health, and it can be done. So go back and read the reels.
Okay, item 6.4, Trustee Weaver, you pulled this. Would you like to speak to this, please?
Yep, so I pulled it for the reason that was just spoke of. I emailed this to the full board, so none of my comments here should be a surprise to anyone. This might be the most glaring example after a year of many examples of how there is complete lack of following any standard or actual written rules in which we follow. And clearly it's blatantly around who is in the majority and who is not in the majority. We follow Robert's rules. Robert's rules state our minutes should be what happens. Essentially, I will actually go a different direction than what Ms. Manval just said. If you really wanted this section to be accurate, it would say trustees made closing remarks. That's it. And people can go and watch the video and find out what those closing remarks are. But clearly, the intention of whoever documents these, and ultimately our secretary or board that approves these, thinks it's value added to have this in the board packet, again, because that's the message you want to get out. Because some of these are very subjective. Express gratitude. Well, again, I express gratitude. I thank the teacher that spoke. So again, instead of allowing to continue to show the subjective nature of picking and choosing who you like and who's your friend, let's follow actual standards, which again, Robert's rules state the minutes are supposed to be what happened. So update these minutes to state every single one of us made a closing remark and have it be accurate, remove the subjectivity, and let's stop having these nonsense.
Trustee Gupta?
Robert's Rules of Order say that if you dispute and have a problem with the way the minutes are written, that you bring to the floor of this board with a motion with a proposed alternative language that you would like to have replace it. I told you that over email after your 7-paragraph diatribe of personal attacks and insults, when you could have just said, I would prefer for the minutes to reflect what I said this way versus how you have it. You couldn't do that. So instead, the way to do that, according to Robert's Rules, which you lectured me on over email for 7 or 8 paragraphs, so I'm bringing it back to you the way you asked for it, is that you would make a motion from this table to amend the minutes according to the language you would propose. You have discussion on that amongst your colleagues, and if you can get the votes, you get to change the minutes. That's how that works.
Madam President.
Trustee Weaver.
Madam President, I can follow that. We can do that. My point is we should just be able to follow basic rules right the first time and not need to have to do the extra work, because, again, that is just wasting time at our board meeting. This whole conversation can be avoided had we just followed Robert's Rules in the first place and applied common sense standard. Again, anyone that reads these meeting minutes can clearly see what is going on and why it's done. So, again, leave it how you want. My point is, let's start just doing things right the first time so that we can stop wasting time at our meetings.
Trustee Gupta.
Point of order, I haven't spoken yet.
No, I've recognized Trustee Gupta.
So the most efficient way to have handled this would have been for you to follow Robert's Rules of Order from the beginning and propose alternative language and request that those be amended accordingly. But instead, we're here arguing about minutes when you could have just done that. And it's ironic to me that I'm the victim apparently here when you're here complaining about minutes.
Madam President?
Trustee Alsbach. Or I'm sorry, Trustee Lekui.
Right. According to Robert's rules, we are supposed to recognize each trustee who hasn't spoken before giving other trustees their second turn to
I
speak.
recognize that. I had already acknowledged Trustee Gupta. You have the floor. Please go ahead.
I'm just clarifying. So I want to just speak in favor of what Trustee Weaver said, only because our meeting minutes used to be a lot more detailed in the beginning of this year. I remember when they were more detailed. And then we made a change to make them more minimalist, more bare bones approach, because that way there would be fewer disputes about what was said and how it's being presented and interpreted. And I remember Secretary Gupta telling us that Robert's Rules only requires us to tell what are the actions in a meeting, how people vote, and things to that matter. So with that, with that in mind, if we want to make this, more minimalist, it should just be applied evenly across the board and fairly to all board members. So I move that we amend the meeting minutes to say each trustee made closing remarks.
Okay. Is there, so the motion is, the motion is to amend item 6.4 minutes. Could you repeat that, please?
I move that we amend the 6.4 regular meeting minutes to say each trustee made closing remarks.
Okay. Is there a second? Trustee Weaver. Okay. All right. Is there any discussion on this? Trustee Blake.
So I would be willing to vote to change what each of them said to be what they say, what they want to say. I mean, I understand it does look like theirs is shorter, but I don't think we just strip it all out. And I think part of the reason maybe why theirs looks different is because most of us say we attended this, we did that. These are factual things that we did, and their closing arguments are often opinions about different issues. So it's harder to summarize them down to factual issues. But if they want to put something different, I'll vote for that. But I don't think you just strip everything out. If you want to better explain by Robert's rules, I would go for that. I don't want to misquote anybody.
Thank you, Trustee Blake. Trustee Alsbach?
Oh, go ahead. If we're going to get into amending the minutes, I honestly would support Trustee Lecui's motion because it just puts us all on a level playing field. If we are going to put in matters of personal opinion, I know the disclaimer at the beginning of the remarks does say that this is our time and it is disclaimed, but I don't think we need to read that into the record because it's out on the video every time. So if you guys wanted to just to say closing remarks, I think that is generic and it takes the value out of the remark, but it is fair and everyone's going to be listed as the exact same thing. So I would support that.
Trustee Lekui, did you have something to add?
The only other thing I was going to say with that, originally I had suggested that perhaps instead of listing out all of the specific events, you could just say trustee so-and-so attended district events and expressed appreciation. Like that would be the way to just make it so that you're not including a bunch of specifics for one person and not for someone else. But that said, I support what Trustee Alspa just said. Just make it an even playing field and we can move on.
Okay, any other comments? All right, we have a motion to amend the meeting minutes under item 6.4, the regular meeting minutes dated November 22nd, 2023, to read, each trustee made closing remarks. Can I see how many yeas? That is a 6-0 vote. So we will amend item 6.4 under the consent agenda. We still need to go back and vote on item 6.1, current bills payable. How many yays? Yay. And nays?
Abstain.
So that's a 4-0-2 on item 6.1. Okay. Thank you. Moving on, our agenda, we are now at item 7, reports. And we are at 7.1, which is the superintendent report, and that will be from Mr. Silveri regarding the budget amendment. Take it away.
Wow. All right, I think I'm okay. All right, I'm actually going to turn this over to Matt McDaniel. This is going to be a presentation of the 2023-24 budget amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Silveri. Good evening. Also like to introduce Beth Granger, our Director of Financial Services. She's here somewhere in the audience. I can't see. There she is. So if there's any questions that I'm unable to answer, hopefully she'll be able to answer for us. So we're going to look at our first amendment to the 23-24 budget. And we'll start off by taking a look at our budget planning objective. And this has been pretty consistent since really the pandemic started. And one may ask why COVID-19 is still a focus and something that we consider when budget planning. That's because we're still receiving ESSER funds and Section 11T funds that related from the pandemic. Those funds end, I believe, 9/30 or September 30th of 24. So we're coming to the end of those funds. Still availability of resources is a pertinent point, and you'll see that there's a use of those COVID funds in this budget. That takes us to our calendar. And so this budget was originally approved in June 2023. You'll remember that we're legally required to approve a budget by July 1st. And at that time, we had presented the budget in May for approval in June. There were still a lot of items that we didn't know. We didn't know our foundational allowance increase. We didn't know what categorical grants would be available. We had no idea what our pupil count would be. So that takes us to December of 23. This is the amendment presentation. We'll ask for board approval in January of 24 for this particular amendment. And then final amendment presentation in May, and then approval in June of 24. Tonight we'll look just at the general fund budget. That's the only amendment that we're bringing to your review this month. So we'll start off by looking at where does funding for the school aid fund come from. This is what funds the school district. The majority of funds come from the state. And you'll see that this is, I believe, the House Fiscal Agency, that the school aid fund budget is essentially $18 billion. I know it's a little confusing because the chart's in millions and there's 17,000 millions, but this is about an $18 billion school aid budget. You'll see that the largest percentage, 44.6% of the school aid fund, comes from sales tax. So as the economy does well and people are spending, that typically means increases for school districts. If we're in a recession and people start holding back spending, then we'll see this number decline. Individual income tax, 21.2%. And just to note, because I know that there's sometimes the belief that the lottery, which is a large amount of money, no doubt about it, $1.2 billion is just a small proportion of the total school aid fund budget. So then how is this money distributed to schools? Since 1994-95 in Proposal A, this became a per pupil foundation allowance. So if we can move to the next slide. I don't know that this is any new information, right? We've been doing this for a long time now. But it moved it from a local property tax to kind of a split. The state makes up what local property taxes don't. So right now we have 18 mills. We're actually able to tax more than that. But by law, we're limited to that 18 mills. And then the state provides the remaining amount. So the current foundational allowance, and actually I think we're going to get into that in the next slide, is $9,608 per pupil. There's a couple notes over there to the left, but I think the big theme of this information is that in 2010-11, the foundational allowance was $8,348. That decreased. It was tough economic times, but it has increased really since then, and we've really had two years of large increases. to 9608 from 9150, and then before that from 8700 to 9150. So some very large increases, though it took a number of years to get us back to that 2010-11 funding level. Next, we'll go back to Proposal A and remind everybody that there are some districts that are able to receive more per pupil. Rochester is not a hold harmless district, so we're receiving $9,608, which is what every school other than the hold harmless schools in the county receive. So you'll see there's some other big numbers on there: Birmingham, Bloomfield Hills, Farmington, Lanphier, Southfield. You know, there's districts receiving almost $4,000 more per pupil, and their local community pays higher property taxes to fund that. But for us, it's $9,608.
Mr. McDaniel, just for the community, for some that might not be familiar with it, can you explain what the difference in that whole harmless is? What makes one versus the other?
Sure. So this actually goes back to 94, 95 with Proposal A. So at the time, and I was actually in 5th grade, I think, fourth or 5th grade. So you know, I didn't live through this, but essentially there was a determination of if school districts were already receiving this much money from their local community, they couldn't move to this model because it'd be catastrophic to their budgets. So they were able to continue to tax their local communities more, assuming that their local community paid that increase in property taxes. So there was actually a minimum foundation and a maximum foundation, and then a hold harmless amount. And Rochester was not at the maximum foundation or the hold harmless, but we weren't also not at the minimum. So we're doing better than most of those school districts, with a lot, and charter schools were another area where they received the minimum amount of money. So this money is distributed utilizing the fall and spring counts, and this has changed a little bit throughout the years. It's been pretty consistent, though, that 90% of the fall count and 10% of the spring count is what determines your membership for the foundation allowance purpose. So that $9,608 per FTE, 90% of that coming from the fall, 10% of that coming from the spring. There's also Section 25E, which states that as students either enter or leave a school district, the school district's able to retain a prorated portion of that FTE. So if somebody were to come into Rochester in December, we would get a prorated portion between that count day in the fall and the spring count in February. So let's look at our unofficial.
Mr. McDaniel, back on that other slide, I was surprised I didn't see another bullet point because I noticed in the RCS Fall Community Update, they explain that for the 23-24 school year, that districts with declining enrollment can average their numbers for the last 2 years' enrollment rather than calculating FTE the way we normally do. I was curious if you could clarify that for us, and which way did we calculate it?
Yeah, and we'll actually get into that in a little bit. But yes, there is state legislation that allows for districts that are in declining enrollment to receive really the difference of a 2-year average to their current count. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Okay. First, let's look.
I was also wondering about 25E. How much plus or minus does 25E generally affect our final numbers?
Yeah, it varies a little bit. Usually it's a handful of FTE. I would say no more than 10 or 15. Okay. Though to get that FTE, and sometimes it swings positive, sometimes it swings negative. It's a lot of work to track those students coming in and coming out. Mm-hmm. And in my humble opinion, a lot of work to get a smaller proportion of the funds.
Oh, but sometimes it does result in an increase in FTE?
Correct. Yep, so it all depends on if students are entering or exiting your school district between that fall count and that spring count.
One follow-up question on that, then how do we determine that? Is it tracking down those families if we see that they've withdrawn their child from the district?
Yeah, so typically we'll get a request from another school district saying that Matt McDaniel entered Avondale if we're going to use one of our competitors on this date. And so if we agree with that, then it's fine. There won't be any questions. We'll release Matt McDaniel on this date. He'll enter Avondale on this date. If we don't agree, then we rely on Oakland County auditors to either rule on that, or hopefully we can come to an agreement of, Matt arrived on this date and left on this date.
So is there, follow-up question to that, is there any formal process in which the district requests that families submit something to formally withdraw their child from our district?
I don't know that we have a formal process for that. There's times that if families have left the district, we typically, or we may not find out until we receive that notice from another school district. And, I know past attempts have been made to contact those families to see, and sometimes they answer the phone, and other times, they don't.
Okay, thank you.
So if we can go to the next slide, we'll look at the unaudited fall 2023 count. And you'll see that this unaudited number is down about 82.8 FTE from fall of 2022. Fall of 2022 was 14,955.12, and fall of 23 was 14,872.32. What we've done on this slide is trying to compare cohorts. So if we look at the class of 2023, that graduated with almost 1,250 students, and then the incoming kindergarten class was 1,108. It's also important to point out that the state does not differentiate between our normal kindergarten program and our transitional kindergarten program. So when we look at those numbers for the class of 2035, you'll notice that it looks like we had 1,123.82 FTE, and we did. And then that class moved into first grade, and 172 FTE disappeared. That 172, there was actually 189 students in transitional kindergarten. There was no expectation for those students to go to first grade. So it's important to point that out, because the state says kindergarten's kindergarten. It doesn't matter if it's transitional, developmental, other terms that districts use. Kindergarten is kindergarten. And so when you look at the cohorts, you'll see that every class has increased even slightly. 2031 was 0.05 FTE. You'll see that transitional kindergarten, 189, losing 172.86 FTE. It looks like that class has grown slightly as well. So the big difference between these two counts is the fact that 1,250 roughly students graduated, and then less students entered in kindergarten. So 1,108.
Mr. McDaniel, you included special ed in this chart, special ed students. I haven't seen that category in some of the prior charts before. Is there a reason why they're included in this chart and they weren't included in the prior charts?
Yeah, so special ed used to be funded a little bit differently, and that has changed this year. So, actually, it's, I believe, in full effect this year. So what happened before the law changed was you were able to get one or the other. So you could get reimbursed for your special ed costs, which were the cost of the people, the supplies, the materials, and I think 28-point-something%. And then you're also able to get about 70% of your transportation costs. Or you could get actual FTE. So you could get the greater of the two, but not both. So for our district, our costs were always greater than the FTE. So while special ed FTE was important, the costs and the reimbursement was more important. And we're actually going to talk a little bit more about special ed reimbursement later. But that was more important to the funding that we're receiving than it is now, where we actually are going to receive both. We'll get FTE funding as well as reimbursement funding. So some big changes over the last 2 years to increase funding for special education.
Okay. And just to make sure I understand the chart correctly, it looks like our special ed population went up by about 39 students. Our general ed population, the projection was 14,549 in October. I remember because we had that update and you clarified that was general ed population. But it looks like we enrolled 14,394, which would make does that mean the projection was off by about 155 students?
I mean, I think that projection that you're referring to doesn't always take into account special ed.
The October 6th, I sent you an email about that, and you confirmed that's the general ed projection number. But it looks like, according to this, as far as our general ed, we enrolled 14,394.
I'd have to review the email. I know that the challenge when we're looking at our enrollment numbers is that FTE and headcount, those were headcount numbers because we weren't able to necessarily determine FTE. It used to be a few years ago that students could count for more than one FTE.
Well, you confirmed in October it was the FTE, the general ed FTE count were the words that you used in that email. So if these, is this head count then, or this says this is FTE also, right?
Yeah, so I believe what you're referring to, there's a few different numbers. One is based on FTE, and that's usually the projection. The other piece is head count, which is, you know, the number of students
That's like
in
for staffing
the building.
purposes, right?
Now, you know, that head count, a portion of that may be special ed students. So my understanding is that, you know, a special ed student could receive some services but not be completely special ed. So you may get a 0.1 FTE for special ed and a 0.9 for general ed.
Right. I mean, I'm just saying, according to this chart, it looks like the general ed population, it was off by about 150 students in terms of the projection versus what it is now. But if you look at this here, if you look at general ed and special ed together, we're down 82 in total versus last year. But the special ed population did go up about 39 students.
Correct, and that special ed population could have increased, you know, from general ed students being identified. All right, so that takes us to questions. Now, we've kind of gone through questions already, but are there any other questions on the information so far?
So, just to kind of follow up, I want to make sure I'm understanding kind of where Trustee Lecouis is going with that. So, if we were projected, if our projection was off 150, should that be more alarming to us? Again, if our enrollment from general ed students is still declining, but then we also projected and missed our projection by 150, is that something that should be raising more red flags to us that we actually lost at a higher rate than we thought we lost?
Well, the
Or we're
projection,
going to lose?
yeah, the projection itself is based on general ed students. They don't project on special ed. So I think we'd have to delve into the details to see, you know, special ed population has increased. If we go back to that last slide, I don't know how many of those students, I think Concetta Lewis could speak to the increase in the number of special ed students that the district's, I guess, accounting for now. We could also talk to the projection company to see how, if any, that has, you know, factors into their analysis. Because they, you know, they don't project special ed, so I'm not sure exactly what rate.
Right. So I guess maybe the question is, can we get to what is the right number or what is the right metric that we should be tracking just to know truly heads of students? Are we going up? Are we going down? I get 100% what you're saying. There's different metrics we have to use for funding and things of that nature. But when we're talking about just truly, are we attracting more students, whether they're general ed or special ed students, or are we losing more? And then what is our forecast out? I feel like we need a data source that we trust. Let me take that back. A data source that we all agree that we're talking the same language and that we all know we're comparing apples to apples. Because what I think we're seeing right now is we're getting a lot of, again, is it apples to apples? Is it apples to oranges? What are we actually talking about? Where truly what we're talking about are we attracting more students? Are we growing? Or are we reducing and losing students? And if we have a forecast out of what we think we are going to gain, are we close to that forecast? Because if we're not close to that, if we think we're going to lose 10% of our students, and I'm just making up a number, and we lose 15, that 5% should scare us. Because again, something's different and we want to address that. So I guess my question really goes back to how do we get to the right data that we know what we're talking about and understand, hey, when we're talking about this data, it's pure budgeting, funding, but this data we're talking about truly, are we attracting students, plus or minus? I would say right now, just through this conversation, you can tell I don't think anyone's clear on that conversation right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a balance between FTE and headcount, right? FTE is clearly funding. And, you know, the other piece to note is that we have students in our buildings that aren't part of this FTE because they didn't qualify for some pupil accounting reason. You know, one of the biggest challenges that we have is if a student isn't present on count day, they have so many days to return. I think it's 30 days if it's an excused absence, and 10 days if it's an unexcused absence. And there's FTE that we lose every year because we can't get kids to come back to school within the allotted time frames. Or at the secondary level, perhaps they do, but they only come and attend 1 through 5, and we lose a proportion of that FTE because we lose 6th hour. So, you know, for funding purposes, FTE for you know, services, and kind of when we look at budget and what services are being provided, you know, headcount is important as well, because, you know, funding drives the entire budget, but you know, if we, for example, had a class that we're at max capacity per the REA contract, and we only got 36, you know, let's say that the max is 30, and we have 31 students in that class, but we're only being paid 28 FTE, you know, we don't get to violate the contract and have 31 students in there because, you know, Matt McDaniel didn't show up and get counted. So I think both pieces are important. You know, I understand your point. And that's really why the projection company also provides 2 different projections. They provide a moderate projection and a conservative projection. So the conservative is really more for financial planning, FTE, and the moderate projection is more for facility planning. So do we have enough space? You know, do we need more classrooms? Do we need to add a section at elementary? Things like that.
Trustee Alsbach.
So I appreciate you giving us the differential between head count is really the operating population you're serving, and FTE is what you're getting funding for. And I understand how that can be different. But could you tell us, like, how big the difference is between head count and FTE? I mean, is it 5 kids, or is it 50, or is it 500? Like, and if it's 500, I'm sure we have a problem, which I hope it isn't.
Well, I mean, there's also, and Consett, I think, can speak to this a little bit as well, is that special ed requires us to provide some services. I think it's speech to either birth to 3 or ECSE that we don't get any FT for, and I don't know if that really kind of counts towards our head count or not.
So it is a bit of a nuance for FTE to head count for special education, because we have approximately 1,800 students in the district that qualify for special education services. But you can see from a FTE perspective, because it only calculates the percentage of time that student is in a special education program for special education FTE. So that is our categorical classrooms for ASD, our level 4 classrooms, CI, our ECSE classrooms, but it does not include ancillary services. So those services do not get counted for special education FTE. So speech, social work, occupational therapy, those sorts of services are not calculated under special education FTE. It's just the time spent in a program for special education from a classroom perspective, if that helps understand the difference between that.
Clarifying question. So you're saying, for example, for a resource room student that's in a least restrictive environment that's receiving, pull-out supports and maybe ancillary supports, that student would actually count as a special ed FTE because they're in a gen ed classroom most of the time, so they would be covered under a gen ed FTE. Is that what you're saying?
So, right, that FTE would be split, but the only portion that would be considered special education FTE is the time in the resource program. All of the rest of their time in the building is considered general education and would count under the general ed FTE.
So if the IEP has 10 hours, then that's the hours that count for special ed.
Correct.
But again, going back, okay, I understand that special ed is a more difficult calculation. Let's just go to then the gen ed. Just talking gen ed, do you have any idea of the difference between head count and FTE?
If we're talking gen ed, I don't know that off the top of my head. I know that every count, though, we do track the number of students that didn't qualify for FTE for some reasons, and certainly get that information.
I'd appreciate that. I do have another question, but you can go.
It was my understanding that with head count, like that might even include students in private schools who still utilize public school teachers. Like for instance, with some of the specials areas, I know like you could be a music teacher who's a public school music teacher who gets paid, you know, that way, but who provides services at a private school. Those students in that private school would still count as part of the head count for the public school because it's a public school teacher. So the head count is more tied to how many teachers do we need and the staffing purposes, whereas FTE is really just, that's how we get paid. That's the money that we're getting from the state. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah.
No, the only other place where head count comes into play from a special ed perspective is for the IDEA grant. And so based on the number of students that we're servicing, which might include some students in non-publics, that will determine the amount of funding that we get from the county or from the state related to the IDEA grant. But from a general education perspective, I'm gonna leave that to Matt and Dave.
Yeah, and from a general ed, you know, that example of us providing services to another school, we ended that, I believe, in 2020. We used to provide maybe it's PE or some services to, I think it was St. John or Holy Family, and you'd be able to count them for head count, and you get a like a 0.05 or a 0.04 FT for providing those services. That was something that ended during the pandemic, and we have never gone back to provide those services to those schools anymore. So from a general ed perspective, I'm not aware of any instances where we're servicing private schools that would count for head count or FTE.
Trustee Lakui?
So for the 25E money, I understand that, you know, it's challenging that you may not know until a district actually files that paperwork and then you hear it from Oakland schools. Do you have any idea how many of those are filed? So how much of that FTE is pulled away from us?
I could get that information too. You know, I'd have to get that information. I know it's students coming in, students coming out, and you know, it's a lot of work for a few changes in FTE. I mean, some school districts, it certainly impacts more than others. For us, it fortunately hasn't been a big change either way.
Yeah, and I understand that especially when your spring count is funded on 10%, it might not even be worth the man hours that it takes to recapture those funds. I was just wondering, you know, like how many requests we get, and then, you know, the head count to the versus FTE. If we have the audit, you know, it's kind of more like how many deductions did we have is kind of more what I was looking for. But thank you.
Trustee Lakui?
I was just wondering, just going back to my previous question, if our FTE is, well, if we've got, you know, 14,394 with the gen ed students, if our enrollment has declined, are we doing the thing where we're averaging the last 2 years, or are we calculating the enrollment the normal way?
My understanding is it's not a change to how we calculate enrollment. It's a change, it's a categorical piece that the state funds and calculates on their own.
Are we going to be averaging the last 2 years then for our district?
For a portion of our funding, yes.
Okay, so that does apply to us, which means that is actually potentially inflating what the number is currently, because we're getting paid for more students than we actually have under this new rule, right?
Yes, but I want to be clear, it doesn't change this number that's on the screen.
Right.
That number is what that number is, but we do receive funding.
We're going to be receiving extra funding, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, funding for the difference in FTE.
And just based on the conversation, make sure I'm clear, we're allowed to average it because we've lost students. That rule is put in place because of the loss of students. This rule is in place not just for our district, but for all districts, allows that average. So again, based on the actual number today, we can receive higher funding because maybe 2 years ago, our student enrollment was higher. Is that an accurate statement?
Correct.
Okay.
And just to clarify too, I mean, this change was made at the state level because the state recognized that there's a declining population overall in the state, and they're seeing this trend across districts throughout the state, correct?
Correct. This wasn't a special Rochester rule. This is affecting many school districts
Correct.
across the state.
Thank you.
All right. So then looking at the actual general fund budget, we'll start with revenue. So there's some changes to revenue assumptions. The good news is it's up quite a bit. So the biggest portion of this is through the state, but we'll get into each different category. Local revenue is up about 1.6 million. 1.5 of this is related to local property taxes. So it goes back to that 18 mills. Property values in Rochester increased. So that means the local portion of that 9,608 per student is higher. So the state kind of gets a break, right? They have to fund less of that because our local community can. So that's the biggest piece. The other piece that's on there is foundation grants and others, very small, minimal amount, 21,525. Foundation grants, I want to make sure that we're clear on that. That's not foundation allowance, that's grants from the RCS Foundation. Federal revenue, we'll see 3.4 million increase, and this is the addition of carryover. Section 11T is the biggest addition there, 2.2 million, 98C about 775,000, ARP flow through in pre-K just under 740,000, ESSER 3 342,000. Other federal revenue make up about 147,000, and then we've also removed carryover from other grants, which was a reduction of about $800,000. On the state side, it's a $9.7 million increase. Big piece of that is special education reimbursement. That's almost 2.5 million. That special education reimbursement is a calculation of our costs. So there were always a couple of years, well, actually 1 year behind. So we submitted costs for last year. Now that they know what those costs are, they know what our reimbursement should have been for last year. So they're adjusting that. About half of that is that adjustment. The other half is now our new estimate for this year. So if special education costs increase for this year, we'll get the benefit of that next year, but it's always 1 year behind. MEPSR's retirement increased 1.7 million, 31A at risk, just over 900,000. Early literacy grant 35A, 170,000. GSRP adding 130,000. We've adjusted carryover for other grants, which total about 700,000. There's some other smaller state revenue, 127,000. And then the categorical funding, one being the enrollment stabilization that Trustee Lacouille mentioned. Right now it's $12,731. That number will increase once they get our actual enrollment and FTE count audited and finalized. We also received 1.2 million for transportation costs. This is new funding. We received 15,000 for student meal debt forgiveness. For last year, that was the transfer that we made from the general fund to support the food service fund, as it's illegal to keep meal debt in the food service fund. We have carryover for mental health, 31AA, 1.7 million. And then Section 97 safety, 1.8 million. So if we look at the next slide, you'll see what that does overall to the revenue side. We're up about $14.7 million to a $228 million budget. Next, we'll look at changes to expended.
Sorry,
Yeah.
before we go through there, so our revenue from the state is like $165 million, or 100, yeah, or no, 169, sorry, $169 million. I'm wondering how much of that is foundation allowance?
Majority of it. Beth, could you work on that calculation?
I'm
And we'll
wondering,
get-
well, if it is with the 14,872 number that includes the special education students, it would have been like $143 million. But that would still leave about $26 million that I'm wondering, where's that money coming from? And I'm just asking because I'm wondering about the sustainability. Like, is this one-time funding, or is this something that we can expect to continue receiving?
Yeah, good question. So some of this funding is funding that's been around for quite some time. 31A probably being one of the more common ones, special education reimbursement, another common one that we'd expect to continue. There are, new grants out there that may not continue. The transportation costs, the 1.2 million, that's something new this year. I know that that was part of the adequacy study, and that there was discussion that that adequacy study didn't really talk about special education, didn't talk about transportation, and so they've been working to try to incorporate components of that study. But that is new funding. The 31AA mental health money, I think this is year 2 of 31AA, so it's possible that that fund doesn't continue. Some of these pieces too, and we'll talk about it, especially when we discuss the grants, is that we've added some positions. I'll take 31AA as an example, right? We've added behavior interventionists, we've added guidance counselors. One of the things we did though is we took last year's grant, we didn't spend it last year, so that's funding this year's people, and plan to use this year's grant funding for next year's staff. So we're able to carry over all of our state funding by a year, which is not our fiscal year, it's actually the state's fiscal year, so 9/30 of the following year. So we at least have funding for this year and next year for those positions. And, based on what the state has done the last few years, we've saw continued increases in grants, which, is a great thing in some ways. It means we can provide more services to our students, but also means a little bit more work on the business office side to make sure that we're in compliance, as well as the curriculum and instructional side, right? Because there's more rules to follow when they tie it to a grant.
I'm surprised that they let you carry it over. That surprises me.
Yeah,
Because
1
usually
year.
there's tighter restrictions on, when you should be using it, so.
Yeah, state law allows 1 year of carryover.
So I have a question though. So how are we tracking specifically payroll that's tied to grant that we're not sure if it's going to be continuing, and ongoing payroll? Because again, I would be concerned, are we set up where if that grant does not come through or funding dries up, that we're just going to cut those positions? I mean, I think we need to have a realistic plan in place if we're tying positions to funding that we are not confident that's going to be reoccurring. Again, I had the experience of living in Florida for a period of time when my wife was a teacher. They dealt with a lot of the Gates Foundation stuff, which brought a lot of bells and whistles. But when Gates money's dried up, those positions were left out to hang in the districts, or left scrambling, trying to figure out how they continue to provide these services that their communities became accustomed to having. So I think that's really the question, is are we making sure that, one, if we are putting things in place, are they sustainable? And if it's tied to grant money that we're not for sure, are we at least being transparent with our community to say these positions may not be here if funding comes up, that those would be the positions that are eliminated? I just want to make sure that we're being fully transparent.
Yeah, so let me address the accounting for it. So the state has a public school accounting manual. One of the pieces that we do have to report is any costs for a specific grant. So that 31AA has a specific grant code. Any people, any supplies, anything that's charged to that grant has to have that code in it. The general fund is all zeros, so you can easily see what charges go to that grant, and that may be reported to the state through our general ledger. That might be a report where we just total the numbers and provide it, but that is something that we are tracking. The other piece, and it'd be the board's purview, is we have a fund balance that is almost 20%. It's 43 million. Historically, and I know that this board is different, but when we got into financial trouble, 12, 13, 14, 15 years ago, the board had decided to use fund balance to support those positions for several years before, making a decision to either change the model, cut, or reduce positions. So, at least for this year and for next year, we have stable grant funding sources for those positions. And as we continue to plan that out, we probably won't know if that funding is going to be around until June of 24 for another year, but that'd be another year out. And, maybe something for the board to consider, for those positions, would we want to spend fund balance in the event that we didn't have those grant funds continue?
It's not good. I would just say that if we're faced with a situation where funding is going to be decreased overall, whatever the reason is, whether it's because we're receiving grants now that are not going to continue, and we find that overall the budget's going to be reduced for what it is now, we wouldn't necessarily tie reductions directly back to what funded the positions in the first place. We would look at the budget more holistically, right? So you would assess everything that's in place, make decisions based on needs and what our student needs and staff needs are, and we would then determine what we would need to do to adjust the budget, whether we would partially use fund balance, whether we would have to make some reductions. But just to be clear, any reductions wouldn't necessarily be directly tied to the original funding source.
Could you provide us with breakdown of the 26 million, so we just have an understanding of what's one-time funding and what is more sustainable, just to be able to see it?
Yeah, I mean, most of these items are on the state aid status report, which is the payment that we receive from the state. The only thing that might not be that I can think of is GSRP. That's a grant that comes directly from Oakland schools. But I would think the majority of these payments would be on that state aid status report. The other piece to mention, just so that the board understands, is that 160, almost 9 million. A portion of that, and it's a pretty good portion, I think it's 17, 18, maybe $19 million. That is the unfunded actuarial accrued liability. So this is retirement costs. So the state gives us 17, 18, 19 million to return to them within, I think, 30 days of them giving it to us. So there's revenue, but there's also an expenditure. So really it's a net zero. You know, it doesn't add money to the budget. It doesn't take away money to the budget.
It's a pass-through.
Yes, it's a pass-through. So, you know, when you look at our numbers, right, 169 million in revenue isn't just our $169 million in revenue to do anything we want with.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Would it be possible for us to get the breakdown of positions and their source of funding, so we can just see from a pure number standpoint how many of our positions are tied to our general funds, which is reoccurring, that we plan to pay for, and how many of them are tied to grant funds that we'd have to at least be looking at pulling from general funds? I think it'd be good just to put that in a data standpoint.
Yeah, I would just add, though, that I think there's some, you know, if we're looking at just our instructional program, but there are some positions like school age care, for example, that is funded through tuition payments from families. So, you know, we could certainly provide the number of FTE funded by grants versus general fund, but just keep in mind that we might want to break that down further to say school age care, pre-K, you know, some of the tuition-based programs.
I'll take the data as granular as you want to make it.
All right. Any other questions on revenue? All right. So next we're going to look at changes to expenditures, and revenue was a little bit easier to go through because changes to each category were limited to the categories that we discussed, right? Local, state, federal. We're going to have changes that happen throughout the budget because, you know, 80% of our budget is people. So we have some costs in here that increase retirement. We unfortunately have no control over what the retirement rate is. The state sets it, and they, I think for the first time in maybe 2 or 3 years, increase the rate, which has led to an increase in costs. We're also a self-funded health insurance plan, which means we pay actual costs for health insurance, and we set a illustrative rate to assume the 80-20 that the board approved, I think, at the last meeting. So those increases, almost $4 million to the budget, are kind of spread throughout the budget. You know, it's everywhere there's a person, and there's people in almost every category of the budget. We also have different adjustments, about $5 million. There's, you know, an increase in FTE. There's also changes to contracts through contract negotiations. Grant funds, 5.6 million of that is increase in grant expenditures, but also an increase in revenue that kind of offsets that. And then there's other adjustments throughout the budget where it's actually a reduction of about $970,000, almost $1 million. So we'll get, if we go to the next slide, we'll get into a little bit more detail as to the differences. Keep in mind that, you know, a lot of these are going to kind of be repetitive. So when we look at basic programs, that increased about 4.5 million. There's 1.2 million of that is related to grants, but the big portion of this is salary and benefits. So that salary and benefits is retirement, that's health insurance, that's also an increase in the number of positions to meet student needs. And then there's some other smaller pieces in here. There's the foundation grants, there's, you know, some small adjustments to equipment accounts and maintenance accounts. And this is, sorry, I should back up. Our basic programs, that's our general ed program. So that's our elementaries, our middle schools, our high schools. That is our preschool programs, and that is summer school. The next category is added needs. So this is our special education programs. This is Title I. This is 31A. This is also our CTE programs. That increased by about $3.2 million. About $1.3 million of this was in relation to grants. 31A at risk, IDEA, ARP, some Section 11T, 98C, and the title funds. But a big portion of this was also salary and benefits. So some of that is that retirement, some of that's that health insurance, and some of that's just additional positions to support special ed. Adult and continuing education, that was a change in grants. Pupil support. So this is our guidance counselors, psychologists, speech pathologists, social workers, teacher consultants, and then paras that don't work in the direct instructional program. So in the lunchroom or at recess. That is up about $3.7 million. 1.3 million of this is related to grants. A good portion, about 270,000, is related to contracted staff. So this could be social workers, this could be speech, this could be registered behavior technicians. And then about 1.8 million is either increase in FTE or that benefit and retirement costs. Are there any questions on that portion of the budget? Because that's the biggest piece as we look at increases.
So yeah, I do have a question on expenditures. So one, I do think a lot of times we focus on the revenue side of it. I have requested on November 11th specific data around spending, because I think one of the areas that our board needs to get more involved in is truly looking at wasteful spending and are we truly cutting down costs. So I'm going to reiterate that, again, on 11th, I've asked for that data. That data hasn't been turned over, specifically around our legal expenses by department. So again, we can start seeing how much we spent year over year for 5 years. So how we can look at what we have in place to start reducing our legal expenses. That goes directly to that. Specifically to programs that right now we have, and again, is very much in the news, around our DEI and SEL, as far as what spending we're putting in those. And so we can look at from a standpoint of what is actual tangible benefit of it, or what are we gaining from it, and truly, is some of it has been reported in the New York Times, is some of it doing harm to our students? So again, as we look at these things, these are just, again, data points that we as board members have to have available to us so that we can say, hey, we're setting metrics as we go into for the superintendent's SMART goals. They got to be based on data sources. So I will send that again, and hopefully at this time we can start getting some of that data turned over to us. But I think we really do need to look at, from a longevity standpoint, where are we actually spending money? Where's our wasteful spending? Where can we reduce spending? Because that's also ultimately what's going to protect us from the standpoint, if there's ever a reduction on the revenue side, that we can make sure that we've prioritized properly what resources we need to have, and that the money is truly going to the value-added piece of it, which, again, I know this bothers some people, but again, it is just truly a manufacturing term. Those that add value to our system are those that touch our students, our product, which are our teachers. So I want to make sure that we are putting most of our energy in that direction. That is not to say anyone around the table does not add value in your roles. That is just, again, a manufacturing term. Those closest to the product, which in this case are our students, are the ones that add value. So again, as of November 11th, I sent that request. It's been ignored since then and not been turned over. I will send that request again after this meeting. I'm hoping we can get that data and start working on that so we can set real good metrics moving into next year.
Okay, so we'll move into the rest of the support service category, which is instructional staff support. That's up about $784,000. That is almost exclusively related to grants. There were some reductions, but grants actually increased almost 900,000, but reductions offset that to a $784,000 increase. The next is general administration, so the Board of Education. This is where legal fees would be budgeted. This is where the superintendent's salary is budgeted. And so there's a reduction there of almost $300,000, partly related to Mr. Silveri is, a retired superintendent, so he's getting his daily rate, but we're not paying retirement, health insurance, other benefits for him. Next is school administration. This is up about $830,000. So this is our principals. These are the people that work in the main office, so secretaries as well. And so this is up, pretty much all benefits. Partially that's related to the retirement and the health increase, as well as a contractual increase that the REA was under a new contract. Business support. So this is our business office team as well as our purchasing team. That's up about $140,000. This is kind of a true up to salary and benefits. So this is additional staff, but last year's was low because we weren't fully staffed for that time period. And actually we still aren't fully staffed. We have one open position. If anybody wants to come work in the business office, we were hiring an accountant. Cheap plug. I don't know that anybody in the audience is interested in that. But next category is operations, maintenance, and security. This is pretty self-explanatory. What that is, that's up about $47,000. Pupil transportation is down about $54,000. Central support, which is technology, human resources, that's up about $500,000. Most of this, or the majority of this, is related to the increase in benefits. That's retirement and health insurance costs, but also a move of cyber insurance. We used to code this under operations, maintenance, and security, and felt that it was better to be coded under a technology need rather than just an overall kind of liability insurance need. Next is other support. This is mostly athletics, and this is a small decrease of about $64,000. So that takes us to our next slide, which looks at our community services. This is mostly school-age care, though our police liaisons are in this budget. We also have some staff that manage our facility rentals that are in this budget. This is also where our services to private non-public schools for special education are coded, and you'll see that this is an increase of about $600,000. So one thing that we did with this group is there were child care grants that had a very short time frame to actually spend the money. So we were able to capture past salaries and to allow for some of those bonuses to continue. We decided to save general fund in previous years and then give them some funds back to continue some of the programs that they have in place to keep that school age care team staffed. So that's the difference there, about $600,000. It's pretty much all related to school age care's bonus. Building improvement services, an increase of about $400,000. This is related to where we anticipate on spending the safety and security grant. You notice around some of our buildings that there's bollards protecting the entrances. This building is not an exception to that. Payments to other governments. This is maybe where Beth is going to have to help me. This is a new state program. Hi, Beth.
So the future educator stipends came out of this section. It's money that we received from the state. This goes to student teachers. The state cannot pay private schools directly, so we were used as a pass-through. So they gave us the money, then we send it to the private schools. So I think Rochester University was one, and then Baker was one as well.
Thanks, Beth.
And those are higher ed. I mean, those aren't K through 12.
Yeah, they're payments to, yes.
Oh, for the student teachers, okay.
No, nothing in debt service. No changes to loan principal or interest on debt. SBITA, that's software-based information technology agreements. This is a accounting change. I won't go into great detail about this, but we anticipate about 86,000 in that. Right now it's not material, so we may not record it there, but we continue to track it in case we need to comply with the accounting change. And then the interfund transfer, no change to that, and that's the transfer to Caring Steps.
For the community services, could you please send me a breakdown of what's included and what we're spending per category? That's another one of these where I've been asking the question since November 10th and sending follow-ups, but I have yet to see it. I noticed a $1.2 million loss in our financial report. I'm just trying to understand more about that.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think you're referring to the audit report, and part of that breakdown is charges for services, grant, and then it breaks down kind of the state revenue. So, you know, some of those items in the community services bucket, we would not have charges for. I mean, school age care is something that you'd have tuition for, and that would offset expenditures, but, you know, we don't charge anything for our police liaison or our SROs. So that is budgeted there, and there wouldn't be any tuition or any revenue to offset that. We pay our portion of that, and there's, you know, maybe some other examples there. But I can work with Mr. Silveri on a response. All right, so moving on to the next slide, that takes us kind of to fund balance. So I'd say the takeaway here is that our original budget was a use of fund balance of about $230,000. We have about over 14 million increase in revenue, 14.4 million increase in expenditures, which is actually in addition now to fund balance of about $88,000. So, you know, just over a $300,000 swing in the positive direction. And a 19.16% fund balance is percent of expenditures. So we talked a little bit about grants, and I want to go into a little bit of detail about what some of these larger grants are doing for our school buildings. We mentioned the 31AA mental health grant, behavior interventionists and counselors at the secondary level. There was also some money to provide calming spaces at our buildings. The safety and security funds, section 97 there. We're looking at the bollards, which are the board approved earlier this year and were implemented over the summer. Looking at boosting radio and cell coverage, adding additional camera coverage, and then looking at window film and shades. And then in ESSER 3 and section 11T, middle school interventionists, math coaches. A big portion of this is also summer school and after school tutoring. ESL teachers, paras, and materials are also funded through these sources for the current year. And then just a reminder is, you know, it's a big portion of that is ESSER 3 and section 11T, that here are the award dates. If we can move to the next slide.
Actually, I have a question on that one before we move on.
Yeah.
Is the 31AA mental health grant, is that the one that we recently surveyed the political parent group, the DEIPN, to get feedback on that, but did not make that available to the entire community? Is that grant?
This one that I'm specifically talking about is last year's grant. Anything new, I'm not 100% sure on. I'd have to get back to you on that.
Is it those funds, though? 31AA, is that specifically the fund in which we're talking about?
As far as I know, that was not a requirement for last year's 31AA. This year's, I'm not sure.
So are we saying it was a requirement to survey a political parent group? I'm confused now what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm confused as to what you're saying.
Okay,
this is last year's grant.
So
I
right,
you know, for
the
this
grant,
year, I don't know that there's anything that we've.
There was an email sent out from an RCS employee.
Okay.
It went to the DEIPN and asked them for feedback. It referenced a last year's grant and a this year's grant. I'm just simply asking, are these the funds in which we were surveying a political parent group and seeking feedback on how we use funds that we did not seek feedback from the entire community? That's what I'm asking. I'm just asking if these are the funds we were talking about, whether they were last year's, because that was reference past years and current years. I'm just asking if these are the funds.
I think Ms. Lewis is coming to speak to that.
In talking with Karen Gilardi, I believe that that survey went out to all of our district-led parent groups, which would include the PAC, the PTA, and the DEIPN as which are representative groups of parents in the district. So it didn't just go to the DEIPN parent group, it went to, again, the PAC as well as the PTA group.
So you have to be part of a parent group to get surveyed for it, but again, my question just went back to.
I can't speak to those pieces. I was just clarifying the point that it was sent to multiple parent groups within the district.
Thank you, Conchetta.
So again, my question goes back to, are these the funds that we were talking about? That's simply the question.
I honestly don't know enough about the email to answer it.
Yes, it is.
All right, so if we go to the next slide, you'll see the COVID funding and their award dates as well as their end dates. So you'll see that most of those funds expired in September of '23, and we have a few remaining sources, which I mentioned earlier, that expire in September of '24. So there's about $467,000 that we need to spend for ESSER 3, and about 4.8, almost 4.9 million that we need to spend on 11T. Next, we'll just show a couple charts and graphs that give kind of a historical context of revenue and expenditures. You'll see that the revenue is kind of that skinnier line, and 14 expenditures exceeded revenue, and then it's kind of reversed course where we're adding to fund balance with the pandemic. 2020, 21, 22, those lines were very close. 23 we saw an increase, and then in 24, which is a budgeted number right now, is pretty much equalized. So it is an $88,000 increase, but very similar. So next, we'll take a look at fund balance as a percent of expenditures, and just looking at this slide, it would give the appearance.
Excuse me, Matt.
Yes.
Trustee
Sorry.
Alsbach?
Actually, I have a question when you're done introducing this slide, sorry. So go ahead with this slide, and then I have a question about fund balance percentages before you move on.
Okay. This is a percent of expenditures. So in just looking at this, it would appear that our fund balance has decreased. And in total dollars, the fund balance hasn't decreased. It's actually stayed pretty steady and even increased in the last year or so. However, the revenue and the corresponding expenditures have increased quite a bit. So if you go back to that last slide that we showed, you'll see in 2020, revenue and expenditures were about $185 million. And if we go to 2022 or 2023, we're much higher than that. If you look at 22, we're close to 200 million. If you look at 23, we're in the 220s. So,
my question is, if you look at the fund balance as a percentage of expenditures, you had mentioned in the past that there was a time when we were spending down the fund balance to prevent cutting programs. Is that what we see in 2014 and 2015?
Yes.
And I understand that it looks like our percentage is going down, but it's because the revenue section is getting bigger, so the pie is adjusting. What are you looking at to be like a healthy fund balance? What is your target fund balance percentage, and what would you consider a concerning fund balance percentage?
Yeah, so the board has a policy to maintain a 10% fund balance. So anytime we're getting close to 10%, that is not a good thing for me. So, we're double that. We're about 20%. I don't know that we want to go much higher than 20%. Historically, we've kind of been around that 20%. Even during the pandemic years, we exceeded that a little bit. I think it really is determined by the board, right? 10% is the minimum per policy. But, if we want to, in the event that there's a recession and lack of funding, we could use fund balance to support the current model. If there's a project that we want to support, we could certainly save or assign or commit fund balance to a future project. A commitment would require board action. An assignment is not as formal as a commitment, so that's something that the board could decide without taking any official action, or the administration with direction from the board. But a commitment would require board action, and really that kind of just shows to the financial auditors and the users of our financial statements that we would need to spend that money down, but that would explain a decrease in fund balance. So if the board wanted to use, say, $10 million to do whatever, build a building, build a stadium, do something like that, we would show it expenditures exceeded revenues by 10 million, but when you compare it to the use of the committed fund balance, then it would make sense to a financial user that this was planned, it was something the board approved, but it's the board's purview as to how we spend that fund balance. The big piece of having a fund balance around 20% is, in districts before I came to Rochester, we used to have to borrow because we didn't have enough fund balance, enough money to pay payroll. So we would do a state aid anticipation note, which a lot of school districts do, which is fine. It just means that you're paying interest on that note and taking some money out of kids or instructional programs or staff that you could have put, because it's budgeted for that note payment and that note interest. If we move to the next slide, you'll see what general fund balance looks like. Again, it increased, planned out during the pandemic, and has now increased and is budgeted to stay about the same. So that takes us to future budget impacts, and we've kind of taken or talked about some of these items already, right? School aid funding is a big future impact, right? If there's a cut there, that means we would look at doing different things. If there's continued categorical funding and grant funding, that means, probably adding staff like we did this year with the 31A money. Ongoing enrollment trends, as Trustee Lukui pointed out, our FTE is lower. We also know that 2020 for live birth rate was the lowest of kind of the preceding 3 or 4 years, but that does seem to have recovered, but that could be an impact when those children born in 2020 come to kindergarten. There's decrease in individuals graduating with a degree in education, so teachers are becoming harder to find. Health and retirement costs could be increasing, right? Retirement costs increased, health insurance costs increased, inflation, supply chain issues, and then just any changes to our operations could negatively or positively impact the budget. So a lot of those things we don't have a ton of control over, but all things that we have some concern about and need to consider as we move forward with budget amendments. Which takes us to our last slide, which is just any other questions on our budget amendment.
Just on that last slide there, I see live birth rate being mentioned again. And stuff like that concerns me a little bit, because you're right, there are some factors that we really don't have any control over, but I keep wondering why live birth rate keeps getting brought up. It was brought up earlier too. If we are talking about the state of Michigan as a whole, that might play a factor. But it's not really a factor for our community here in Rochester, because our population isn't stagnant. We have people moving here all the time. There's houses being built, and according to the census data, our student population keeps increasing. And according to Michigan school data, the number of students who are choosing to use other schooling, like private and public schools, has been going up. Like in the last 10 years, we went from about 1,500 students to 2,700 students, and that doesn't even capture everybody. We used to consistently be at only 8 or 9% at private schools. So especially as we move into strategic planning and setting a vision, we need to just be realistic about the landscape. Okay, we're losing students, declining enrollment. How can we capture those students? We need to capture the ones that live within our district. And they are here because they're moving to our area. Rochester is not having this population decline, so we've got to stop using live birth rate as some kind of justification for why this is happening. We have to look at the real reason why it's happening.
Any other comments?
One more comment.
Yes.
I was wondering why we didn't review any of the sub-account amendments that total the 14 million adjustment. Like we sometimes do breakdowns of the Caring Steps Fund, Bookstore Fund, Food Service Fund. Was there a reason why we didn't see those in this report?
Yeah, no, that $14 million doesn't touch any of the other funds. This is just the
Okay.
general fund.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just reiterate Trustee Lukui's point. We need to get just to the real data, to the real root causes of some of these issues that we face. The strategic plan survey was one that I think a few of us tried to have the questions be a little more pointed, but we did get some surveys back that supported that we just aren't, there are people polling their students that still live here. And so you used the term earlier, Matt, and I agree with it. We have to look at other districts as ones that we compete against, and that it needs to look at the ones that are truly within our control, and how do we go back and get those? And truly, I think we said we started trying to do exit surveys for for people that poll. Again, it's voluntary, so I don't think we have any control to make sure we get them, but really identifying the why, and that goes back to the original part of the conversation around getting some true data that we can look at and see what is our problem, what is our projection, right? What is the normal flow that we expect that, yep, is outside our control, and that just is what it is. But when the data actually says, no, this is a problem, what are we doing about it? And to that point, continuing to reference that we're either using state of Michigan data or we're just doing better, because that's the other thing we do in presentations apparently, occasionally, is we'll say, but well, look, we're better than the state of Michigan or we're better than Oakland County. I just think we need to make sure that we're using real accurate data for what's here in Rochester and what's within our control. Because I do think there's lots of parents that would be open to bringing their students back to Rochester if we actually address some of the concerns that they have.
Any other comments from the trustees? Okay, thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate your work on this.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I appreciate the attention and the questions.
Now we're going to move on to, still under item 7, reports under the agenda. We are now on to 7.2, which is the January work session discussion, and I believe that's Mr. Silveri.
Before we go, I just need
sure.
to step out for about 5 minutes. You continue and I'll be...
Are you sure? Anyone else? Does anyone else need a break?
But I don't want to lose half the audience. That's a good excuse.
Okay.
I can take my own break. You don't have to.
Okay, all right.
No feedback that time, good. All right, I'm actually going to call on Corey Heitch to come on up, and Corey is going to speak to tentative plans for the January work session.
Thank you. So we've had several ongoing discussions about literacy, particularly at the foundational level, and structured literacy resources and programs that need to be looked at, evaluated to see if we are providing everything that we need to be providing for our students at the elementary level. In January, we'd like to continue that conversation in potentially a different structure than we've done it previously. And one of the key pieces that we'll be adding and getting questions ahead of time and your thoughts ahead of time would be, the first step is we've invited the board to visit classrooms at McGregor this week so they can see it in action in a facilitated way, to see what questions, wonders comes out of seeing our kids engaged in literacy instruction with the resources and hearing from our professionals and experts at one of our buildings. And then another avenue that we're looking at to kind of help facilitate and guide the conversation is I'm partnering with Oakland Schools and having conversations about who can join us for that discussion, who may be best to come and provide a county-wide perspective on structured literacy, what trends they're seeing, what research that they're looking at, resources that they've evaluated, that they've been asked to support. So having our partners from the ISD level join us in late January as well.
So, Corey, you had mentioned you'd like questions ahead of time. How much lead time do you need from board members to submit questions to you?
Well, I think, obviously, more than a week in advance helps. But I also recognize that sometimes questions may not pop up until we get closer. However, in terms of the robustness of the conversation and to make sure that we're having the right perspectives at the table, to make sure that we're getting a broad enough perspective across the district and the voices there are representative. Obviously, the questions a week or more in advance would help us prepare for that.
Thank you. Trustee Gupta?
Corey,
At that January meeting, do you anticipate that part of that meeting would be you and your colleagues at the administrative level providing some recommendations about how to move forward, or would that be premature at this meeting?
I think that could potentially be a part of that discussion as we update kind of a current state. We've had some small pilots going on looking at structured literacy resources across multiple grade levels across our district, so we'd be able to update on that. We have professionals that have been engaged in some professional learning as well that we can give an update on, and just how many, what we're looking, some of the feedback from that as well. And the other piece, and I would be leaning on our colleagues from the ISD level to add maybe a more robust lens to, is there's a lot of legislation at the state level right now that may impact how we proceed and with what level of urgency we proceed at. And then the other component of that is, we're engaged in a pretty healthy strategic planning process right now. And I've shared with colleagues, I don't know if there's any district in the United States right now that would go through a strategic planning process and that have something related to early literacy come out from that. So we need to make sure that that's a factor as well.
Trustee Blake?
So as I stepped out, can you just give me like the 30-second or the cliff notes of what you're planning in January? I must have missed that.
Yeah, so the cliff notes is to partner with different professionals within our district to provide perspective, but also partner with colleagues at the ISD level through Oakland Schools, so they can provide a county level perspective.
I had some thoughts about what would be helpful for me in January, and this is just for me.
Sure.
Have we done that yet, or is this a good time for that?
This is
Okay.
great, yeah.
So first of all, I want to say I've watched at least one, I think 2 presentations, and I can tell that a lot of work went into that from the staff. So I want to acknowledge that. You can tell a lot of work went to it, but I think for me, I need to see something different in January. I need to, first of all, I think it should be targeted really at the early elementary literacy, the K through 3. That's where a lot of the discussion is about. If you have something new, I'd like to hear that. I don't necessarily want to hear the same stuff. And again, I understand the work, so I'm not being disparaging. A lot of people have sent me questions and information that I don't have the answer to, and I'm hoping I can get it from you. I don't know if you've read or watched, rather, or heard the Sold the Story podcast. People have sent that to me repeatedly, and I would like to hear a response to that from the district. How does that impact your beliefs on what we should do curriculum-wise? If it does, how? If it doesn't, why is it not relevant? I'd also like to go into a little bit of what if. So what if the board decides that we want to make a change? How does that process look? Do you have ideas about other curriculums at this point? What's the timeline? I'd like to hear a timeline. What would be the steps, what we would have to do if we said we want to make a change? We need to do this, then we need to do this. It takes this long to do it. How much training do the teachers need? I'd like to go along with this idea that what if we do make a change? I want to see what that means. I want to see when that would happen and how that would happen. And I don't have that information. I'm not the expert. So that's why I'm asking you for those questions. I will just say this. I think there is a hunger for change. I'm hearing a lot of that. And you're the experts, but we're the ones that have to make the decision. So that's the kind of information that would be helpful to me more so than this is what we're doing. That would be helpful. But I'd also like to hear more about what we could do and what that would look like.
Trustee Lukui?
All right, well, first of all, I just want to extend a thank you to our board president because she added this item to our agenda and I worked really hard to try to get it on the agenda. I wanted to do everything possible that I could. I reached out and talked and attempted to talk one-on-one with all of my board colleagues about this. And I met with Corey Heisch. We had a really great conversation and agreed on a lot of things, which was awesome. I thought it was a really good start. And at that meeting, we both agreed that this next work session needs to be new and different and more workshop-y so that our district can move forward. And I discussed with him where I was coming from with some of this. You know, even given this year's Michigan Department of Education guidance that districts ought to be switching to high-quality curriculum based in science of reading research, about units of study receiving a failing grade from Ed Reports, as well as the policy brief that was located right within that guidance. And we also discussed the strategic plan and how that will guide, our future in literacy instruction. We've already heard a lot of testimony from community members over the past couple years. I've heard from teachers too. And we know that literacy is a hot button topic that needs to be explored. So I expressed that I would like to hear not only about the balanced literacy that our district is currently using, but also from the structured literacy perspective, because we need to hear about that from someone who's not me and from someone who's an expert and experienced with that and has that longevity and can present to us. And Mr. Heisch, one question I have right now is, you mentioned at our meeting that you knew someone, Katie Wilimowski, that was experienced, a good presenter who might be able to come. Is that still a possibility?
Potentially, I would prefer that we start with our Oakland County ISD first, in full disclosure, just because they would be able to speak more to what they're seeing, county trends, and even, outside of our little regional bubble within the county, what's happening across the county, what conversations they're having. They're hearing about what trainings that they've been looking to plan for staff. I feel that would be a necessary first step. However, if that does not materialize in the way that I hope, that would be somebody that I reach out to as well.
Okay. And when will we get to find out who will be present at the work session?
I have a meeting tomorrow at 12:15 where hopefully I will have more clarity on who will be joining us, and then I'll share that with Mr. Silveri, and he'll be able to share with the board.
Okay.
Trustee Alsbach?
So first of all, I do want to acknowledge the fact that Trustee LeCouy did reach out to all of us, and she and I had a very good conversation about this. Interestingly, one of the things we were talking about is bringing in an outside expert who could discuss structured literacy, and we had talked about bringing in different people. Oakland Schools was one of the people that was mentioned so that we could hook into whatever initiatives are supported through our county. I also want to thank you for sharing that policy brief. And just like Trustee Blake said, I really do want to hear from the administration. I've been given a lot of questions from people, and if more people want to send me questions, I'd be more than happy to send them on. But the policy brief you did share, says that who are the people that are responsible for selecting curriculum. And it's really, if you look at this graph right here, the school board is only 18% of the time responsible for selecting the curriculum, where school leaders and teachers in central office are both in the 80%. So I think that's what we really want to hear, is we want to hear something from you guys about, what we're doing, what teachers as experts find. My approach, I'm very open-minded to both approaches. I feel like a teacher needs to have a bunch of tools in their toolkit so that they can, in that context, kind of work with their reader and figure out what their reader is struggling with. It may be a decodable, it may be more making meaning of the text, which are kind of the two different approaches. So I'd really like to hear from the teachers about where they find what to be useful. I do totally agree with what I think that both trustees have shared, is we'd like a very focused presentation. What we're hearing from the community is not a lot about high school literature. Not that you guys aren't doing a fantastic job in that area, but we're hearing more concerns in the elementary. So we'd like to have, some type of response and more of a focused presentation on that. And I, being a past English teacher, I taught high school and I taught second grade. So, I'm excited to see this. I can't wait to see what you share with us.
Trustee Weaver?
So first, I want to thank Trustee LeCouy for really the work she's put in around literacy from the time that she's taken her seat on the board. It's been a passion and truly an inspiration to how to try and make this process work. As far as the town hall, how do we incorporate two-way dialogue with our community? I think that's a big part of it. I mean, sorry, it's a work session, but that idea of it being a town hall mentality where, again, the community actually gets to ask questions. I would actually prefer you to go outside of people that are going to give us the Oakland County perspective. So if you know a great resource that you can bring in that will just be able to speak to the subject matter and maybe be a little bit removed from some of the connections or some of the inner workings, I think that would be beneficial, because I think that's really what people are talking about. And even as appointee Blake mentioned, the sold a story. Like, that premise behind that, it really goes down to it, is that the stories I took away from it, again, as someone that's married to an English arts teacher, is that really the teachers trusted the system, trusted where that information was coming from, and as they learned, they were really mortified by it, that they could have actually been doing something that wasn't helping students. So in no way was it, and you listen to that podcast, is it about blaming teachers or blaming them for what they were doing. They trusted, and it goes back to board, superintendents approved it. So yeah, we have to take that ownership. So I think really what this town, or again, I keep going back to town hall because that's really what our community wants, but again, we're trying to find a happy medium in there, is really providing just actually the factual information and trying to drop some of the feelings and personal. And actually, that's why I actually have suggested when I talked to Trustee Lukui that I would actually prefer trying to get it away from our staff a little bit so that they don't feel attacked. That we really can, and if that means bringing someone in that can provide, the balanced literacy approach versus the structure, and just have it really be about what the information is and be informative and then answer questions, I think that's the direction we really should go and try to pull away some of the emotion that is around this topic. And again, there is definitely, it's whether it's from the parent side, it's their kids. When from a teacher side, it is people that have believed and thought they were doing the right thing or believe they're doing the right thing. So really just trying to remove some of the emotion, and I think that's really the direction. So I would prefer to see us have, if it needs to be both sides of it, having people that can speak to that, answer questions, but I would like to see us have the two-way dialogue where the community can actually get their questions answered as well.
Any other opinions? Trustee Lukui.
I was wondering, is that something we could look into with the two-way dialogue component? I think you mentioned that RCS did a summit at one point, or is there a good structure for that?
Yeah, and again, in our conversation, that was really born out of, we know we have a strategic plan coming as well, and the pretty safe assumption that there will be language related to strategies related to goal work related to elementary literacy. So, the idea of two-way dialogue, reciprocal conversation, feedback, input, awareness, I think more is when would that be, what's the best time for that? Would that be after a strategic plan is created and shared, and then having a specific literacy conversation around that when that strategic plan is formed? Is it prior to a strategic plan? I had mentioned that previously the district did engage in literacy summits within the community, so we know it's been done in our community, and we know that we would have a structure that we could lean on if that still feels like it fits. I think my overarching question in our discussion, and I've shared it with others, is end of January the right time when there will be a strategic plan that's voted on and approved after that may have more specifics, and okay, then how do we move this forward?
Thank you, Corey.
So just from a logical standpoint, stepwise, and if we're talking about going into strategic plan and we come out of our strategic plan, and I would assume it's going to be based around we want to teach kids to read, like that's the goal, teach kids to read, that we want to have the conversations prior to going into that to learn. If we're going to have to make a decision between whether it's structured or balanced, that we'd want to have that conversation first before we go into a strategic plan to say, what are the steps? Because as we've been walked through by Scott Fuller and his team, what comes out of the strategic plan really should be steps that we are implementing. So if we already have the steps we're implementing to the goal of teach kids to read, then it would seem then we're just doing the second part to appease the community to say we did it. It's not value added at that point because we've already come up with the steps to get there. So just from a process standpoint, it would say we should have the conversation first and learn, hear from people, gain that information, and then walk into our strategic plan and come up with the steps in which we meet the goal of teaching kids to read.
Trustee Gupta.
What I would like to see is our recommendations from you all that reflect a combination of data that are responsive to the strategic planning data, the surveys, the focus groups, the themes of those that are tied to a specific, recommendations that are tied to a specific vision, part of the vision that ends up coming out of the strategic planning process and tied to a goal that we can work from to say, okay, this is the SMART goal associated with literacy in elementary education. And then let's work to, you guys provide some recommendations about how we can have measurable objectives about that. To me, I don't know if end of January, and this was something that I said in the discussions prior to this meeting about this with colleagues, I don't know that that's the right timing, quite frankly, because why would we, I don't know. I guess to me, there may be a need still for more community input once we flush out what the actual vision is and what goals are part of strategic planning. Specifically, it wouldn't be just, I would hope at least, just having done strategic planning in organizations and teaching it at the college level, I would hope that a goal from our strategic plan is not as simple as improve literacy. We need to be able to dial down more into our data and figure out what it is we need to improve specifically about literacy, particularly if we're going to have measurable objectives associated with those goals. So that takes time, and it might take more stakeholder input and engagement processes. And I don't want us to presume to know the outcome of that and have, try to do this whole confirmation bias thing about what we think it's going to result in on the front end. We should let that process play out organically and see where that gets us and work together as a community to build those goals and those measurable objectives.
Thank you. I'd like to speak. So, Corey, I think you've heard from several of us here what we'd like to see. I would also like to lean into the understanding that you talk about continuous improvement all the time. And I see that that is an ongoing discussion that you have with your administrators and your teachers and your staff at every building. So, and tying that in with the future vision that we're creating right now, that we're in the process of creating, I would also be reticent to have any kind of discussion, community-wide discussion, because I'm going to say that I would be surprised if the vision doesn't include something that specifically targets literacy, and what does that look like? We don't know yet. So, so I look forward to your presentation, the work session in January. You all heard Trustee Blake. I think you were out taking a break, but any questions they would like at least a week prior to the presentation in order to give them time to provide tangible answers in our work session itself. So, any other questions? Trustee Blake.
And are we thinking about any mechanism for anybody other than us to ask questions and submit them?
At this point, it's not my understanding that that's the way that the work session has been structured. Mr. Silveri?
Madam President?
Mr. Silveri?
Give it a sec. I would suggest that what I heard tonight too is that you folks have received questions and that you've gotten feedback from others in the community, right? So as representatives of the community, by all means, if folks have questions that they have shared with you, would like to share with you, and would like to see addressed, we would welcome that, right? That doesn't just have to come from you personally. I do agree in terms of the strategic planning process coinciding with this. We're in the visioning process now. In and of itself, that's not going to get into literacy all by itself, right? But when we get into actually developing the plan, that's when, because we feel so strongly about this clearly, the board does, you have the opportunity there to make sure that it is addressed. And once it is included in the strategic plan as a topic of focus, then we get into the weeds and specifics of what's that going to look like over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. What specific actions will we take? Well, you start with what's the expected outcome, right? So let's say it's a 5-year plan. You want to have dialogue first and identify what are we expected to accomplish at the end of these 5 years? Where do we want to be? And then you go back and specifically get into what are the strategies we employ along the way to make sure that we accomplish that. So assuming that early literacy is going to be a focal point of the strategic plan, given all the dialogue about this, I think I'd be pretty shocked too if it's not. Then we roll up our sleeves and we get into what are we going to be doing over the course of the next year, 2, 3, in order to accomplish what it is that we would like to at the end of the plan.
Trustee Lukui.
All right. So it sounds like, as I'm listening to everyone talk, that we are in agreement that we would like to take in community feedback And we'd like to use community feedback as we're forming our strategic plan. So, and I think as a board member too, I feel like we should always be wanting to take in community feedback whenever we can. And I also know that there are people who have much more intimate experiences with the literacy issues than I have. And I would like to hear from them, and they might come up with questions that I might not come up with because I don't necessarily share all of those experiences. So one thing I'm wondering is, as I hear you all talk, I'm not really hearing the arguments that you're using to support not having two-way dialogue. So what is the actual downside of having two-way dialogue on January 29th prior to setting our vision and coming up with the steps? Like, if we want the order to be, we take in community feedback and then we set our plan, doesn't that make more sense? Because otherwise, if we're doing the plan and we're, setting out steps and then we take in the feedback, it's sort of too late. It's like we've already pushed something top down on the organization without taking in all the feedback from everybody, from the community and from our administration and from our teachers and from everybody who we would want to be involved.
Trustee Gupta?
So just for clarification, you're feeling really sure that we'll have a vision and all of our goals mapped out by the end of January for our strategic plan?
No, I'm saying exactly the opposite. We don't have any of that mapped out, which is exactly why we should take in feedback so that perhaps we will.
We've done surveys.
Point of
and
order,
focus
Madam
groups.
President. I'm explaining my thought. The idea is that we take in the feedback and we use, perhaps that feedback might influence us as we move forward with strategic planning. Perhaps it will spark new ideas for our administrators, for teachers, for board members. Perhaps it could be useful actually in informing our vision and informing the goals and the steps.
Trustee Gupta?
So we've done that already. As part of the strategic planning process, we have thousands upon thousands of survey responses where we've asked about curriculum specifically. We've had focus groups. We've got mounds of data to look at from our community, from various stakeholders in our community to inform that process. That's the whole point of doing that. So I'm confused about why you're saying we aren't engaging our community or using community feedback when we have done that. And we are doing that, and that's always been a part of the plan. No one here has said that we don't want to utilize or engage in two-way dialogue with our community or community feedback. We are all saying that we aren't sure about the timing, that we want to do the timing in a logical way. That's what we're saying.
Mr. Silveri?
That's okay.
Oh. Go ahead.
I was going to say that, yes, we sent out the community survey. Focus groups were conducted, but we actually didn't see any of the comments on the survey. We actually weren't part of the focus groups. We do have a facilitator who will be relaying some of that information to us, but I don't see why something like this couldn't complement that process, especially since we aren't privy to all of that data anyways. We haven't seen it.
Trustee Gupta?
In what world would it be a good idea for us to be privy to a bunch of identifying data about our constituents? That doesn't make any sense.
All right, that's not the topic. The topic is, what's the downside to having the two-way
The
dialogue?
topic is that we already have the data and you're proposing a duplicitous process to one that we've already done.
Okay. Mr. Silveri?
What I want to be careful of, I believe the same, that we have surveyed our community through strategic planning, and we just got some feedback from Mr. Fuller indicating that we did get quite a bit of feedback through that on folks expressing, I don't remember if it was stated as concerns or how we worded it exactly, but he confirmed that was one of the things people are questioning and would like to see us address, right? So we've done that. And what I'm concerned about partially is that we're doing an awful lot of surveying community members on a lot of issues. We've got a survey coming out, in fact, maybe coming out as soon as tomorrow, giving people the opportunity to respond to a survey regarding the superintendent search as well. We're going to be involving people in stakeholder meetings on that as well. We're going to be kind of knee-deep in that strategic planning process based on the feedback we've gotten already. I don't know what would be gained beyond what we have already by holding kind of an additional forum on that specific topic, when that's certainly not the only topic, I think, that's going to be identified through strategic planning that's going to be of interest or concern. And I don't think what we want to do now is for every single topic where people may want to see us, people meaning it could be board members, could be staff members, community members, where they would want to see us potentially take a deeper dive through strategic planning and really focus on those areas. Would we do the same with all of those areas? I don't know. I tend to say trust the process too and let it take its course. We do have a process in place even now where and I appreciate that most of the board members are going to take advantage. I will one of those 2 days as well. I want to see and hear for myself, but we'll go into the classrooms, see and hear what we're doing, and then have the opportunity to address your questions, including any questions you may have received, which I'm hearing that you've received a bunch already. And certainly this is a public meeting. People can hear this discussion. They're welcome to chime in. They can submit questions through Talk to RCS if they would like to. They can contact board members individually. They can certainly add questions to the mix. We'll get those from you and we'll address those as best we can.
No.
Trustee Weaver.
So we're dancing around a lot of things here. So as we walk through, if you do a process, you start at inputs, outputs. You start at one end, you end at the other end. So if we want to get information to put together a strategic plan, you want the people to be informed. So again, if you're going to hold a conversation, which again, we're saying the work session is about getting information around literacy, we're just talking about what does that format look like. What I'm hearing is essentially we just want to do something so we can tell the community we did it and ask questions. Our community has made it very clear. They want actually a town hall. They want two-way dialogue. They want around literacy. It is a topic that is very, very important to a lot of people. So we're trying to figure out just the format. But to sit up here and continue to try and dilute the idea of like logically, how does it make sense to have the conversation? No. If you want information before you make a decision, you have the conversation first. If we want to just say we, again, just are going to do something and say to the community, yeah, we did it, then fine, check the box and move forward. But that's literally what's going on. End of the day, Mr. Severi, it goes back to, could we do it for every topic? You could, I guess. But right now we know this is an important one. So why don't we actually listen to our community and try to give them what they want, in which we actually will get good information out of it to then logically walk the next step into the strategic plan and use that information that we got. Again, if you do not feel that the value add is allowing the community to actually be heard, because I agree with you, surveys aren't all that valuable when you're only giving them to select people sometimes and we don't know where they're going. But if you actually have an opportunity to where I think was more important, the people that actually will show up and say, hey, I want to have a say and I'm not going to hide behind an anonymous survey, that means something. So again, let's call our community to say, be part of this, show up, get involved. And this is probably the issue right now that if you talk to most parents is the one that touches the most people that are very passionate about, because it is the fundamental thing that kids need to be successful in life and in school. So again, I think anyone that goes back and actually listens to this whole conversation is going to see it. It comes down to either you value the input from the community or you don't. But let's just move forward. Like, just make a decision, because it's very clear. Again, anyone that goes back and watches this video of just the arguments that are being made or the cases that are being made, it's a process is you start here, you end here. If you want information to make a decision, you have the conversation first. You don't have the conversation after you already put the steps in place.
Trustee Gupta.
So I have a question and a comment. My question is for you, Trustee Weaver. What tangible metrics or data do you have to provide evidence that you know that the majority of our community wants a town hall on literacy? The question is, what evidence do you have, tangible data that you like to talk about, that the majority of our community wants to have a town hall on literacy, since we like to make data-driven decisions, right?
Trustee Gupta, this is absolutely hilarious. This is where you want to go. If you honestly think at this point that we have not gone and looked at. You just heard people say, we've surveyed, we've done.
That doesn't mean they want a town hall.
Time out. So again, the people that have reached out and made their voices known have used that terminology. So if you're just going to say because the absence of no one saying something means they don't support it.
So you don't have any evidence? Is that a no?
I have the people that actually show up at our board meetings and have asked for it and
That
written
would be
to
a
us.
no. Okay, so on to my
That's not
comment.
a no. This is
Madam
absolutely ridiculous that you think this is appropriate or any way to respect our community and what they've actually said. If you want to be tone deaf to what the community is saying to you, continue to do
Trustee
it.
Weaver-
Embarrass yourself. I'm okay with
Don't
it.
characterize the question,
If you,
which is what you just did.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I mean, if you had the evidence, I'd be happy to respect it, but since you're saying things and can't back it up with any evidence, I'm skeptical.
Madam President?
I'll send you the emails of when people have asked for town halls.
So my comment is that, to the point around, people hiding behind an anonymous survey. Well, what I've been told from a lot of people, probably just as many or more that have told you they wanted a town hall, anecdotally, is that people are afraid to have their names out there because they're afraid you're going to attack them on social media.
So,
Okay,
I mean,
Madam President,
I'm gonna-
point of order,
I'm
let's
gonna-
keep the discussion focused on this work session.
I'm going to address that, though.
No.
If you're going to want to have a say in the direction of public education, you should have the courage to say it publicly. If you cannot say publicly what you believe should be part of public education, that's a you problem, not a me problem.
Okay.
Madam President.
Trustee Lukui, I am wrapping, everyone will have an opportunity to make one more comment, and then we're moving on to the next agenda item. Trustee Lukui.
This won't take long. The idea here is not suggesting that we do another survey. It's not suggesting anything that's duplicitous. We haven't done something like this before, and it is something that people have written to the board about. The question that I originally posed was, what is the downside? We know that, I talked with a very agreeable administrator who said this has been done before, and it sounds like this is something that would be possible to accommodate if we were interested in that feedback. I'm getting the impression at this point that people are not interested in that feedback prior to making the strategic plan. So that's my brief statement.
Does Trustee Blake.
So I'm hearing 6 people here who are interested in hearing about this topic, who do want to do the right thing, but maybe have different ideas. But some people think they're the only ones who do, and that's what I don't understand. We all care about this. I've had long conversations with Trustee Lukui, and I supported her in getting this on the agenda. So these 2 over here don't own this issue. The rest of us care about it too. I'm not done. As far as getting the community to speak and finding out what they think, I also want to find that out. But I think we've gotten a lot of information already. My concern, the question from Trustee Lukui is, what's the downside of having a town hall? My concern is you get people that are very upset, and they come in, and then you put our staff up, and it becomes very adversarial, it becomes very confrontational, and then it goes off the rails from being productive. If there was a way to make sure that this could be productive, I would want to do that. And I do think we should try to build in some ability to have questions. I think that people should, whether it's at the end or providing it to us, but I don't want to see the Jerry Springer show here. I think we get enough of that already.
Okay, I'm going to call on Trustee Weaver, and then Trustee Alsbach if she has an ending comment, and then I would like to make a comment, and then we're going to move on the agenda. Go ahead, Trustee Weaver.
So these conversations would be more productive if people actually listened and responded to what actually people said instead of what they want people to believe they said. So no way have I imposed that I own this process in any way. I've just pointed out logical steps in a process. So again, that goes back to it. I directly address appointee Blake's position on trying to pull the emotion out of it by saying we should not bring in people probably from our staff. If we could actually source out actual experts on the 2 areas, that would move the emotion. So 100%, I've put forth ideas to try to reduce the emotion of this topic, which you can clearly see there is. And yet, multiple trustees and appointees are on this table want to fabricate things that were said. Simply
Okay,
stating,
excuse me.
simply stating,
You're characterizing
They
what people are saying.
fabricated-
You
they
are
fabricated-
characterizing what they say. Trustee Alsbach.
No, I'm not done. I'm not done. So again, as we're continuing to see this idea of just getting so emotional about things that just aren't actually being said. So yes, go back to what I actually said is when I started would be why not, in the process where we actually try to pull as much of this emotion out, have actual experts on the balanced literacy and the structured literacy, provide information, answer questions, two-way dialogue. That seems like a logical way to gain the information around literacy, which everyone says they want, allow our community that wants to have input to have it. What is the actual downside to doing that? And in no way is that saying, I own this topic.
Trustee Alsbach.
Corey, thank you for presenting, and I appreciate the administration bringing up literacy again because obviously, this is something that's very important. Literacy is very dear to my heart. Those of you in the public who have questions, please reach out to all of us through Contact the Board. Reach out to one of us. We do want to hear from you. I'm sure there will be public comment at this work session, so you can also have your stories heard. I do think it's better if we collect the questions beforehand so that our administration can give thoughtful answers and possibly, kind of collaborate and see what the themes are. I am concerned about the decorum of our meetings and the way, we've heard curse words and made up titles tonight. So I don't think I really want to subject I don't really want to subject our administration or our teachers to the type of treatment some of us endure on a regular basis.
Thank you, Trustee Alsbach. I would just also like to add that a work session is also an opportunity for public comment. And to her point, it would be beneficial if our administrators and staff knew questions ahead of time so that they could address them. However, that does not preclude any public community member, parent, to come to the work session and to share their opinion, voice their concern, or share a perspective. So we welcome that. Moving on to item 7.3, the strategic plan update. This is our third report, and G&D Associates was selected in June to help lead our strategic planning process. To date, we've had great input on a survey and a week of focus groups in November. Scott Fuller and Gregory Denby from G&D Associates are in town this week for a 2-day vision development workshop. Myself, Trustee Lukui, and Trustee Gupta are taking part in this process. The vision development builds on the input from the surveys and the focus groups. And G&D hopes to have a vision narrative to share with us at our January 29th meeting. That vision will then be used to develop a strategic plan that will have specific prioritized deliverables and projects. We hope that will be available by mid-April. I'm excited about the work that's being done and look forward to hearing more as we move forward through this process with the end goal of having a new strategic plan that will guide our district. Moving on to new business, item 8. We have item 8.1, which is a curriculum department new course adoption. And I believe that this is also Mr. DeLuca. Go take it away.
Yep, thank you. Good evening, Madam Vice President, members of the Board of Education, executive team. This evening, the curriculum department is bringing forward 5 courses for the Board of Education's approval. 2 of the course recommendations consist of course resequencing, and 3 of the course recommendations tonight are new courses that will be added to the scheduling course book. Tonight, we're joined by members of the curriculum team who are sitting over there quietly. Thank you guys for being here and sitting through the meeting. They look, I said they're waiting for an airplane or something over there. That's what they look like. They're sitting there. But following the recommendations tonight, Madam President, we would like to start with the approvals, starting with the ceramics. And I thought maybe we'd bring them up individually so that the board had questions for the team, we can then do the vote for each recommendation.
That would be great.
Okay. Starting with ceramics, if I could have Dustin Coleman come on up. This is for a recommendation for approval for high school advanced ceramics course. The curriculum department is recommending adding advanced ceramics to the high school course catalog starting in the 2024-25 school year. At the high school level, there's a need for an official advanced ceramics course. Their curriculum advanced ceramics course is already created. The teachers are already teaching the course as an official split class. With the ceramics class, and students are already learning the advanced ceramics, I guess you could say, thresholds. The content covered in the advanced ceramics course would be creation of functional clay pieces, use of advanced techniques, use of hand building, use of wheel throwing, and advanced surface treatments. The curriculum proposed has been reviewed by the Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning and the Executive Director of Secondary Education. So in a sense, what we're doing here is we're making one course, one ceramics course, one advanced ceramics course, instead of running them combined. And right now, the advanced ceramics course is not in the course catalog. So questions from the board for myself or the team member here?
Actually, I have one. Since you're splitting the class, will it necessitate any additional equipment purchase, like new wheels for throwing pottery and things like that?
No, it will not.
Okay, thank you. Any other colleague questions? No? Okay. With that, I'd like to make a motion to approve the advanced ceramic course adoption for it would be for the upcoming school year, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
That's moved by Trustee Gupta. A second? By Trustee Lakui. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I believe that's a 6-0 vote.
All right, thank you, Mr. Coleman, for coming. Appreciate it. Next up. Next up is recommendation for approval for changes to science course sequencing and graduation criteria. The science team will come up to the microphone. Starting in the 2024-25 school year, the science course sequencing for high school students will consist of any 3 full years of science that cohesively encompass all the Michigan State standards. The new graduation requirement pathways will give students alternate options to better fit their ability and interest level. The course sequencing will be as follows for high school students. 9th grade, biology. 10th through 12th grade will be either chemistry or physics, coupled with a physical science chemistry or physical science physics. And our team can explain more. I had some questions earlier in the day. Our team can explain more about that. Stakeholder input was gathered from district science department members, high school administration and counselors, and current high school students. This decision is rooted in the need to address student challenges with math and science content in physical science courses, the redundancy of curriculum covered within multiple courses, and the practice of allowing 9th and 10th grade students to take 2 hours of science core classes concurrently. This curriculum proposal has been reviewed by the Superintendent's Policy and Curriculum Committee, the Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, and the Executive Director of Secondary Education. And we have team members here for the board if you have any questions.
Okay. Do any of my colleagues have questions? Trustee Lakui.
I just wanted to thank you for looking into this and making this change. I've heard from community members who have asked for this exact change because they were looking for more options to take other science classes going forward. So it seems like a wonderful idea. Thank you for your work on it.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, I will take a motion then to approve the science course. Did you have a comment? No. The science course sequencing at the high school level. Do I have a motion? Okay. Trustee Lakui. Do I have a second? Trustee Blake. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is a 6-0 vote. Motion is passed.
Thank you. All right. It's going quick, I like this. Next up, recommendation for approval of curriculum shift in middle school math accelerated courses. If I could have our middle school team come on up, and I'll read the recommendation. In middle school math, we have 2 course pathways starting in the 6th grade. Students can take the standard pathway or the accelerated pathway. We are proposing a shift in the Michigan math standards that are taught in Accelerate 6 and Accelerated 7. Concurrently, in Accelerated 6 and 7, the pacing needed to cover 1.5 years' worth of content is in 1 year creates a situation where some math concepts cannot be covered in a profound way. The proposed shift is as follows. To create a course that allows for advancement but without the rapid pace, we propose Accelerated 6 will be covered all the 7th grade math standards and supplement needed in 6th grade standards. I might have messed that up, but you guys can cover that. There's a lot there. This format shift allows for rigorous conceptual understanding and application of concepts within the accelerated courses. Middle school accelerated teachers and middle school math administration are in support of this shift in the curriculum of the Accelerated 6 and Accelerated 7 courses. The curriculum proposal has been reviewed by the Superintendent's Policy and Curriculum Committee, the Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, and the Executive Director of Secondary Education. And I have the team here who can explain the why in the shift and what's going to happen, because it can be confusing for a parent or a board member who really doesn't understand the current curriculum that's in place. Questions from the board for the team?
Trustee Weaver?
So I think I understand it, but so my question was really centered around what happens to these students that are currently in 6th grade accelerated now? How does that change affect them? How does that?
So they would continue with their program. So we would start this in 6th grade for next year and then continue it with that year.
So that doesn't create any issue though as far as teachers needing additional teachers from a number standpoint?
No.
Okay.
I'll just say too, I appreciate you guys. I was in the Policy and Curriculum Committee, and so I asked a few questions, and they did a really nice job of answering my questions and helping me to feel good about this, because when I first heard about the switch of the math curriculum, I was nervous about kids missing out on critical foundational skills that might have been in 6th grade math, but they explained that 7th grade math is really like 6th grade math with extension, and this offers teachers more flexibility and being able to like figure out what projects are applicable, things they want to do within this new curriculum. And it seems the majority of teachers are all on board with this change too, and really made me feel good about it. So thanks very much.
Thanks.
That's a good summation, because that's exactly what they said. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, the extension word.
Yeah,
Yes,
the extension,
yes.
right, was the key word.
Yeah.
Any other, Trustee Alsbach?
Being a parent in the district who had 3 people go through this transition, I really appreciate that you guys communicate to the 5th grade teachers, 5th grade parents about how to do this. I know as some of us have our first going through the system, it's harder to navigate the system and know the choices. And I also really appreciate that if, a 5th grade parent kind of misses that, like, wow, I had no idea, which, full disclosure, I was that 5th grade parent. At this point, they have an opportunity to switch into that accelerated track. So having that option for algebra in the 8th grade is really going to open up a lot more opportunities for students that are wanting to excel in math or want to get their math over, either way. But I really appreciate the fact that you guys are communicating to 5th grade parents and that you have that flexibility to go in and out of the track.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'd like a motion to approve the middle school shift in math accelerated 6 and accelerated 7 curriculum. Do I have a motion? I see that from Trustee Alsbach, and a second from Trustee Gupta. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That is a 6-0 vote. Motion passes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Okay, moving along, recommendation for approval for Symphony Orchestra Class Edition. After an examination by a task force in 2016, 2017, and 2017-18 school years, the Board of Education voted in February of 2018 to approve an orchestra program for RCS that would begin in the school year of 2018-19 with the 6th grade class. The program was slated to grow each year by adding an additional level class yearly, with 7th grade added in 2019, 8th grade added in 2020, and the first orchestra class added in the high schools at 2021. Now with the inaugural class of orchestra students reaching their senior year in 2024-25, a need is present for the advanced orchestra class being created. This course will expand the skills that are taught in concert orchestra, reaching learners who have attained more skills and need for a higher level of rigor. Teaching 9 through 12 orchestra in one class will be challenging, as the skill progression from grades 9 through 11 is significant. This course, along with concert orchestra, will meet the needs of all learners. The addition of this course ensures orchestra students will have the same differentiated learning opportunities that the band and choir students currently enjoy. We recommend adding the new course, Symphony Orchestra, to the course catalog effective 2024-25 school year. Instruments for this course will either be student-owned and/or will be shared with the instruments for concert orchestra. No further purchases needed. Curricular materials will be a scaled method, and literature will be chosen for symphony orchestra funded by the annual orchestra library budget. This curriculum proposal has been reviewed by Superintendent's Policy and Curriculum Committee, the Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, and the Executive Director of Secondary Education. Madam President.
Thank you. I would like to comment before I let my other colleagues do so. I really appreciated your presentation in the SPCC meeting. And I shared in that meeting that this voting on implementing the Symphony program was the first thing I voted on in 2017 as a new trustee. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am to see this program grow to a point where we have to add another course. So I am all for this. Any other comments from my colleagues? Trustee Lukui.
Thank you so much for your work in growing this program. I'm really excited and thrilled to support this new addition for the class. I'm so glad there's a need. That's wonderful. So well done.
Yes. Any other comments? Seeing none, I will take a motion to approve the implementation of a symphony orchestra course effective in the 2024 school year. Do I have a motion? Trustee Lukui? And a second? Trustee Alsbach? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's a 6-0 vote. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our last one for the night.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. We are looking to adopt the French for Careers, German for Careers, and Spanish for Careers in World Language curriculum. Beginning in the 2024-25 school year, the World Language course sequence for high school students will include post-AP courses in French, German, and Spanish, in addition to the dual enrollment option. The proposed course sequencing will be as follows for the categories I just listed. It would be a level 1, level 2 course, a level 3 course, a level 4 course, Advanced Placement, World Language and Culture, which would be our AP, and then the dual enrollment option, the community college, or we could have the careers courses that I just mentioned. So this careers course would be a 5th year careers course, or even possibly a 6th year course, excuse me. Stakeholder input was analyzed from District World Language Department members and the current high school students from levels 3 through advanced placement levels. Because students may begin their world language studies in 7th grade, they complete AP World Language and Culture Studies in 11th grade. Currently, students have the option to dual enroll with community colleges, college or university to continue their world language studies. For students who wish to earn college credit, this option is ideal. However, the data indicates that dual enrollment poses obstacles for some students, such as high tuition cost and transportation. French for Careers, German for Careers, and Spanish for Careers offer students a rigorous post-AP learning experience within the district. Because the World Language for Careers courses are conducted completely in the targeted languages, which would be French, German, and Spanish, an intermediate, mid, or high level of proficiency is required to take these courses. These courses promote the exploration of careers in the expanding global economy while students simultaneously interact in a multicultural, multilingual setting. World Languages for Careers offers our post-AP students a challenging pathway to refine their communication skills and cultural knowledge while investigating professions that require proficiency in the target language. This curriculum proposal has been reviewed by the Superintendent's Policy and Curriculum Committee, the Deputy Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, and the Executive Director for Secondary Education. Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Dula. Any comments from my colleagues? Trustee Alsbach.
I just want to say that I really appreciate us offering something that allows a student to continue their language studies within the frame of classes. As a coach, I can tell you sometimes the dual enrollment is challenging for students where they have to miss out on evening activities to attend their classes. I can also tell you that my son went through Adam's German class, and he ended up living in Germany for 4 years. And while he could speak the language very well, he told me that I ended up saying, "What is this?" which I can't say in German, but he's like, "What is this? What is this?" because he had no vocabulary specific to his career. So I think this would be a great way for him to develop something like that, so he would have been a little bit better when he was in the shop and not always asking them, what's a carburetor, what are all these things. But I think this is a great idea and a great opportunity for students.
Any other comments? Trustee Gupta?
Yeah, I'll just say I love seeing this too, because our son, when he was here before he graduated, he had kind of maxed out. You know, he had done well, he didn't do dual enrollment, but he had maxed out on the AP, and he would have definitely taken this course if it had been around when he was a senior. So, really cool. Thanks for offering this.
Yeah. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'd like to make a motion to approve the French, German, and Spanish for Careers World Language Curriculum Edition. Do I have a motion? Okay. That's Mrs. Gupta. Sorry, Trustee Gupta. Do I have a second? Trustee Blake? All those in favor? Aye. That's a 6-0 vote.
Thank you.
Thank you to the board for your work on this in the subcommittee, but this was the first time it came back to the board table in 3 years. It's been
Yeah.
nice to go through the process again, so
It was
we thank
fun.
you.
It was fun to hear the presentations in the policy and curriculum meeting. Thank you, Neil. Moving on to item 8.2, the approval of bid awards. There's approval for 4 bid awards, one for HVAC equipment at Adams, North Hill, Meadowbrook, and ACE, the second for Adams High School courtyard wall repairs, and the third for the renovation of the West Middle School ASD classroom. And the fourth is for 3 band and athletic equipment trailers, one for each high school. Mr. McDaniel.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Would you like to take these all 4 at once, or do you want to do them individually?
I say we take them all at once.
Okay. All right, so our first funding request is for the equipment to purchase the replacement air handling and HVAC at Adams, North Hill, Meadowbrook, and ACE. The equipment request is for 2 air handling units for Adams, 27 vertical unit ventilators for North Hill, 19 vertical unit ventilators for Meadowbrook, and 7 vertical unit ventilators for ACE. Due to the long lead time of this equipment, the bid documents for purchase of the equipment were issued as a separate bid package. On November 9th, the district advertised an RFP for this project in the local publication, the Rochester Post, as well as posted RFP documents on the purchasing page of the district's website, Sigma, and BidNet Direct. The district received 2 responses for construction trade on the due date. The responses were evaluated by the district's Director of Capital Projects and a team from Frank Rewald & Son. All the accepted bids were found to be initially compliant with the required specifications per the detail in the bid summary, and they were analyzed on bid content, completeness, inclusion of required submittals, and compliance with required specifications. Interviews and evaluations were conducted according to the attached documentation. Source of funding for this project is the sinking fund. Based on this information, we recommend that the board award the following contracts. Category A, HVAC for air handling units equipment only to Train Technologies, $178,038. Category B, HVAC equipment only vertical unit ventilators to Bowl House LLC, $1,219,990 for a contract sum of $1,398,028. And we recommend that the board also approve the allowances and construction management fees as detailed in the attached analysis in the amount of $169,114 for a total project cost in the amount of $1,567,142. Our second recommendation for tonight is for the Adams High School courtyard wall repair projects. The scope of this project is to repair the spalling and failing precast concrete panels in 3 courtyards. There are 13 window surrounds that have these panels, and on November 9th, we advertised an RFP in the aforementioned publications. The district received 7 responses for 1 category of construction trade. They were evaluated by the same team with Rewald and the Director of Capital Projects and were found to be all in compliance. Source of funding for this project is also the sinking fund, and we recommend that the Board of Education approve the contract for cast stone repairs and coating to National Restoration Incorporated for $69,525, as well as approve the allowances and construction management fees as detailed in the amount of $102,191 for total project cost of $171,716. Our third project this evening is for the West Middle School ASD classroom renovation project. Scope of this project is to construct a sensory room and calming room within the space of 2 classrooms, along with providing additional counter space and plumbing. These rooms will require a special wall padding system that is a separate bid package, and that package is being currently prepared. On November 9th, the district advertised the RFP, received 26 responses for 11 categories of construction trade, and they were reviewed by the same team and were found to all be in compliance. Source of funding is the sinking fund, and based on this information, we recommend the following awards. Category A, selective demolition to Blue Star Incorporated, $9,250. Category B, carpentry to Huron Acoustic Tile Company Incorporated, $59,525. Category C, glass and glazing to Pearl Glass and Metals LLC, $2,470. Category D, flooring to Mastercraft Floors, $6,920. Category E, painting to Tom Fernari Painting LLC, $2,960. Category F, window coverings to the Shear Shop, $1,304. Category G, wall padding is going to be rebid. Category H, fire protection to Absolute Fire Protection, $10,047. Category I, plumbing to Fierce Plumbing, $5,350. Category J, HVAC to Tempco Mechanical Contractors Incorporated, $8,700. Category K, electrical to Summit Electric Incorporated, $26,246. And an owner consultant held contract for air balancing to Enviro Air Incorporated, $2,200. For a total contract sum of $134,972, plus allowances and construction management fees in the amount of $74,935, for a total current project cost of $209,907. Our final project tonight is for equipment trailers. The scope of this project is to provide an 8 by 24 foot utility trailer to each high school to transport band and athletic equipment. On October 26th, the district advertised RFP and received 6 responses. These responses or proposals were evaluated by the district's Director of Capital Projects. The source of funding for this project is the 2015 bond fund. Based on this information, we recommend that the Board of Education award Trailer Country USA for the purchase of 3 band and athletic equipment trailers at $12,760 each, plus an allowance of $1,500 for any unforeseen accessories that may be needed, for a total cost of $39,780. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDaniel. We'll start with any questions. Trustee Lakui.
So I noticed so looking at the equipment trailers, the recommended company was Trailer Country USA, and they didn't have a check in the box for bid bond. I was wondering, was that a requirement, or if not, why was that included on the proposal?
Mr. Musio, do you want to speak to that?
Good evening. You're talking about the bid bond?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had talked to our purchasing manager. She said she could waive that fee because the fee's not over $50,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Typically, it's required for projects 50,000 and greater, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot of them that didn't include that, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I assume that the trailers will be licensed to the district, is that right? And then if they're licensed to the district, who will be pulling the trailers? And will the district provide insurance for those drivers? Or how does that work?
Yeah, we check through our insurance carrier, and they're covered. And it'll be like band boosters or athletic boosters or, staff from the schools.
And then would they be using district vehicles or personal vehicles?
They're personal vehicles.
Okay, because then I was wondering who bears the responsibility then for accidents, like if someone, or theft or damage, or if pulling the trailer damages the vehicle, is there any
Yeah, it's covered through our
concern?
insurance
Okay.
provider. Yeah, I checked with, before I went down this road, because we were struggling trying to keep up with all the requests. I reached out to districts across the state. I'm in contact with directors across the state, and that's what most of the districts do right now. They have their own trailers, each high school, yeah.
Sounds good.
Pete, do these trailers come with a warranty?
Mm-hmm.
How long do you?
It's
do
just
you
a standard one-year
standard?
warranty, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then another question about the HVAC equipment pre-purchase.
Yeah.
It looks like there was only one bid that was received for the 2 different types of HVAC equipment.
Yeah.
Is there a particular reason for that? Or?
I don't know, that's the only people that bid. I don't know, no. It wasn't restricted to anybody in particular, really.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we only received
Yeah,
one.
that's all we got, so,
Okay.
yeah.
And I was wondering, like, in the future for the vertical unit ventilators, for instance, Could we include the manufacturer and model of the equipment in the reports in addition to the name of the firm that has the final sale?
Oh, sure, yeah, they're on the drawings and specifications
Okay.
for the bid documents, here, absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, they match, that's our, like, our building standard that company's been providing them through when we did the bond program. So we bought hundreds of these of the same, similar manufacturer.
Good.
Any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the bid awards as presented? Moved by trustee Gupta. And a second, supported? Trustee Osbach? I guess I jumped the shark here. We had board discussion. Any public comment? Seeing none, let's vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Abstain.
Okay. So that is a trustee Lukui, did you say, were you a yay?
I said aye.
Okay, aye, okay. Okay. Actually, that's a 4-1. Okay. The motion passes and the bid awards are approved. Next, we have public comment. Agenda 9 is public comment. This agenda item provides an opportunity for board members to hear from community members. If you have not completed a yellow card, and they look like this, please do so at this time and hand it to our Safe Ed officer in the yellow shirt. When addressing the board, you will have 3 minutes to speak. We will try to let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please be mindful of this time limit. When addressing the board, please state your name and your relationship to the district. Please address your comments to the entire board and not to individual board members, school district employees, or members of the audience. The board will not respond to comments or questions during the meeting. However, someone will follow up if needed. The board reserves the right to exclude from our meeting an individual who engages in conduct that constitutes a breach of peace. Looks like I only have one comment as of right now, and that's Mr. Albert Rush.
Thank you, board members and administration and staff. I was a little hesitant to come forth because many times I've come forth in the past. Unfortunately, my comments have been misconstrued, misrepresented, taken out of context in public areas that I don't normally follow or see or look, but I get words about things that I've said. I haven't spoken in about a year and a half, and still things I said before are still being said in various areas and various places. I do not, and just want to make it very clear, I do not have any political affiliation. I've never had a political affiliation. I'm very clear in just wanting to do the things that are very important to care for all students here at Rochester High School. I'm coming forth because so many parents, so many students, and different people are being called out in Facebook posts by different members, people of the board, because I can't address anybody indirectly. And my concern is making sure if there's an issue, if you does not have clarification of something that I've said, please reach out and talk to me directly, but do not put my name in places where I don't have any approval of what was said or misrepresent the things that are being said. Just because you say something quite often does not make it true, because I'm speaking for myself personally, but I know 100% fact, I have no political affiliation. The DPIN is not a political organization here. And if anybody has any facts of where we've gotten some money from, or where we've got any people, or who's backing us, or whatever we do, because all we do is care about, and everybody's invited to be a part of this. Many board members have come.
30 seconds.
Many people have came and done those things. So my thing is, if you're gonna speak directly about me, please give facts, give direct information. Do not parse things that I say and try to make it seem like I said something different. I care about Rochester schools, have worked with parents, administrators all around each and every time, and thank you for this opportunity to present these things this evening. And I enjoy being a part of this. I have been a part of this district for 12 years and have worked with so many teachers, so many parents, so many people everywhere, and I'm glad to be a part of it. But do not misrepresent what I've said or done. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is item 10, additional comments. 10.1, members of the Board of Education. Additional comments by members of the Board of Education can be made at this section of our agenda. Individual board members may use this time to share information about school visits, updates from committees or organizations they are assigned to, or to express their personal opinion. Do any members of the board have additional comments? Trustee Blake.
I do, and I need to make very clear tonight that these comments are just me. This is not on behalf of the board. I want to talk a little bit about, and there's a reason why, the walkout today at RCS and student speech, because this has been blowing up on social media, and I want to make some things clear. There are things we can do, and there are things we cannot do, but the Supreme Court sets those rules. And if anybody wants to know about that, the ACLU website has all kinds of information about what's allowed and what's not allowed. The seminal case on this area is Tinker versus Des Moines School District, and it says in that case that First Amendment rights applied in light of the special characteristics of the school environment are available to teachers and students. It can hardly be argued that either students or teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at their schoolhouse gate. There are a whole series of cases that follow this case that set forth what the parameters of those are. That does not mean, though, that a student can do just anything in school. There are limits, and the limits are that if the conduct complained of would materially and substantially interfere with the requirements of appropriate discipline in operating the schools. So what does that mean? It means that you cannot destroy property. It means you cannot disrupt the whole day where other classes cannot take place. Certainly, it means you cannot call for violence. And if we had a situation, which I don't believe we did, where there was a call for genocide or something like that, which we've seen at some other schools, that's something we could regulate, and we would regulate. But these are the kind of rules that we have. So we can't really go in. If a group of students decides that they want to quietly leave class and go out into the courtyard or something of that nature because of a cause that matters to them, we can give them the consequences that they would have if they left class unauthorized. So if there was a test and they missed it, they wouldn't get to make up that test. But we cannot just tell these kids that because of your viewpoint, you lose all your constitutional rights. So, and why did I bring this up, and why did I not support putting it on the agenda if I wanted to talk about it? Because I didn't think that this was emergent such that we needed to change our whole agenda around to cover this. And frankly, I think that the people in the public count on us as the board members to have maturity and to be level-headed and not to panic at any little thing that happens and have to change our whole lifestyle because something, or our whole agenda because something happened that day. And I don't like the suggestion that I've seen on social media that we need to educate these children. We need to tell them and teach them that their opinion that they expressed is wrong. And by the way, just to be clear, I don't share their opinion. It's not my opinion. But that's when the First Amendment is the most important, is when somebody is expressing an opinion that you find abhorrent, when you feel repulsive, or you just don't agree with. And we learn that there's a whole part of law school, weeks and weeks, where you learn all the parameters of the First Amendment, and it's constantly changing. But I think it's just important to say that we will protect the First Amendment rights of our students. We also will protect the safety and security of our students. And we can do both. I think that my board colleagues are committed to that. And so that's my comment on that. I do also want to wish happy holidays to everybody, and in conjunction with that, happy Hanukkah that we're a couple days in. Thank you.
Trustee Weaver.
So I'll start with addressing appointee Blake, misrepresenting anything that was said in my actual post that I brought this up. The idea is that I actually asked and communicated through our board that we get facts and we don't just speak in these broad terms and bring up broad laws. We can have policies that specifically address situation. In no way did I address opposing anyone's free speech. If anything, I've been very adamant about protecting free speech and how our board's actions actually stifles free speech, which again, we've seen through board votes. So this is what we keep talking about and why our board meetings are so frustrating. So to our community, I'm very frustrated where even when we saw in the literacy conversation, sentences can be said that are very straightforward And then you listen to people absolutely just act like something else was said because they benefits them politically. They think it makes them look good. I don't get it, because people, our community's smart. They can watch the video. They can see what happens. Around the walkout, yes, I communicated on right when a neighboring district had one where absolutely there was very vile anti-Semitic comments being made. That district was addressing it. It was concerned. They have policies in place that are specifically around that. So we brought it up to our superintendent, to the board president, and to the entire board was copied on, so they were aware of it, of just how do we handle political walkouts of that nature, sharing the specific facts, not speaking in broad terms. Said, oh, we don't know of any. We didn't do anything about it. Clearly, we didn't talk to the staff, put anything in place of how we would address it, because we see today we have building administrators left to deal with this on their own. So how it's handled at Rochester High School versus maybe Adams High School could be completely different. And that's, again, where the inconsistencies come from in the stuff that we have to concern, which absolutely can be addressed by board policy, which is in the purview of the board. The term around educating people is, yes, I've made it very clear. We should actually make sure that we are teaching accurate history, because we are seeing throughout our society right now many people that do not have a good grasp on history. That's why you see things being said that are absolutely things that you look back and go, that's something you would have thought you saw back during World War II. And why in the world would anyone think it's okay to say it today? Because there isn't that good grasp, and no one's willing to just say and sit down and have that honest conversation. I think our history teachers probably could do a great job at it. I think they really could, and really have that debate. So what I called for was that it would probably be beneficial for students to have these conversations in controlled environments with our professional staffs, where they share their ideas and other people can share their ideas, which again would be representing the actual First Amendment, that everyone can share their ideas, challenge each other's positions, and learn from one another. That is what I said. In no way would that challenge anybody's First Amendment right. And to that term, as again, appointee Blake wants to point out these broad laws, we can then have to define those into policies in which our district can enforce. So again, to say, what is that line? And yes, we have to draw lines, and we use our lawyers to draw those lines appropriately to make sure what is that point when it crosses, and then this is the consequence. Right now, we as a district do not have that. And that is what has been consistently going on. We could be working on that as a board. We have chosen to use Miller-Johnson and do it behind closed doors. So when the community's like, why don't you bring policies to the table? That's not how you write policy. It has to be vetted by the lawyers, which again, our board has taken action to only allow the board president access to the lawyer. So even if we drafted a policy, how do you get it vetted? So to bring that to the board table and act like it's gonna get voted on is just irresponsible. So this is, again, why I get where the community is frustrated that our board meetings just absolutely go off the rails, because again, people are more concerned with addressing what they think the community wants to hear and their points than just actually addressing what's been said. So people's words speak for themselves. I'm confident in our community that you can see what's going on. I'm confident to see in the news, even some sources that have pushed this radical political ideology, which absolutely is embraced by our board and the DEIPN, is coming to see that it's not beneficial. It's actually hurting institutions, and that continues to go on. So at what point do we as adults just start dealing with facts, reality, addressing what people say, and stop living in these false narratives? So again, I'm confident that our community is seeing it. We're moving in the right direction. More people are speaking up. There isn't as much fear from people that honestly have opinions, seeing educators speak to what's going on. So again, thank you to the community. We are blessed. We have amongst resources. We live in a great community. I'm very proud of it. Thank you.
Trustee Lakui? Trustee Alsbach?
I just want to circle back to what is actually the business of the board, is hearing and representing our constituents. And I want to encourage everyone who has literacy questions to send them through Contact the Board, so that we can make sure that our administrators have good time to thoughtfully prepare answers. And I look forward to that session. I do also want to wish everyone happy holidays, whether you celebrate Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. I hope this time of year finds peace and joy in your family. Thank you.
Trustee Gupta?
Yeah, I just wanted to share that over the last couple weeks, I had the opportunity to meet with Brian Chelson, who may still be here, but probably not if he's smart, from Stony Creek High School, principal there, one of the schools that I'm a liaison to, and he was able to show me around Stony and tell me a little bit more about what they're doing this year and have going on there, including piloting their advisory, which is a really neat new model that I'm looking forward to learning more about over time. I also attended, along with Vice President Annis and President Butel, the Oakland County School Board Association dinner last week. It was great to meet and network and learn a little bit from other trustees from around the county. And then this past weekend, the 3 high school robotics teams in collaboration hosted our, I don't know, is it third or fourth annual FLL Lego Festival at Rochester High School. So we do 4 festivals in 2 days, and we had 102 teams participate, 80 of which are from our district. Every elementary school in the district was represented in full force. So that's about 400 students total. And the really cool thing about it is it's almost exclusively volunteer run from people in our community. Along with that, I just wanted to report out some cool news that I learned this week, which is that our district is the #1 district in the state of Michigan for pulling down FIRST robotics grants, meaning we have the most number of FIRST robotics teams, K-12, of any district in the state of Michigan. And we are awarded a grant from the state of Michigan to our district for those programs.
Thank you. I just would like to wish everyone a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, however you celebrate. I hope it's an enjoyable time with family, especially to our hardworking staff and educators and our administrators as well. With that, I will turn it over to item 10.2, members of the administration. Mr. Silveri. Or Mr. McDaniel.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Vice President. As one of our student reps alluded to earlier in the meeting, it is Transportation Appreciation Week. So I just wanted to extend my gratitude and appreciation to our roughly 110 bus drivers, 25 monitors, a team of mechanics, and our office team led by Ursula Lewis. So we're very appreciative of what you do. You're the first and the last people representing the district, often for our students. So thank you.
Real quickly, too, many of our schools this time of year do some charitable work for those less fortunate in our community, giving trees, that sort of thing, a lot of times in conjunction with their PTAs. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, thank them for that work. And in addition to that, Rochester Area Youth Assistance donated $2,500 toward 14 different schools' efforts who applied for some funding. So I wanted to also recognize Raya for their ongoing support for our students. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right. A couple of things I said I would circle back to. Question came up about invoices. I want to stress that we have made them available, but I know it's not the most fun thing to think about coming into the office and going through stacks of invoices. So we've been working on the current software system. Finance software system doesn't really enable us to provide electronic invoices. But I think it was just Friday that I met with Mr. McDaniel and Ms. Granger, and believe we've got a solution. And so as of next month, we're going to be able to provide those electronically. I was going to surprise you with that in Friday's update, but surprise is off.
Happy holidays.
You know that. The Yo and Yo update, they did indicate initially that they would be completed with that review of those specific financial transactions that we provided to them. by the end of October. What they indicated to me is, in fact, I got an apology from them that it took so long, but it was simply because their assumption initially was that they were going to be looking back at data from the last year or two. It turned out that some of these transactions went back as far as 2002. And so it took us, they were requesting data from us that just took us a long time to dig and find for them. So that's the reason for the delay. They have completed their work. I've actually established a meeting. I'll be meeting with a gentleman from Yo and Yo over the break during one of the days that I'll be working. He'll kind of brief me on that. And I'm asking him to come to the January 16th meeting then to provide a report to the board and give you an opportunity to ask questions. So that's coming. In regard to the student walkout, given that everybody may not have seen this, heard this, there was a communication that went out to Rochester High families today, so I'll just quickly read that aloud. As you may be aware, current events in the Middle East region have sparked protests and prompted deep discussions around the world. Some RHS students respectfully approached school administrators about an opportunity to provide a peaceful demonstration supporting humanitarian action. During the conversation, students were made aware that any disruption to the learning environment and loss of instructional time would be considered. Approximately 30 to 40 students gathered today and maintained an orderly environment. School leaders will continue to work with students to educate them about alternative opportunities to share their voices in ways that are consistent with the student code of conduct, meaning basically that they wouldn't leave class and become truant and be subject to whatever consequence may come from that. Although the demonstration was not a school-sponsored event, it was not, the safety of our school community is always our priority. In order to ensure for the well-being of our students, a safe space was provided for those choosing to express themselves. Administrators and Safe Ed partners were available to ensure a secure environment. No individuals from outside the school community were permitted on campus. So even though we tried to help the students identify alternatives and steer away from a walkout when it became clear that they were determined to do so, I think we do have an obligation to make sure we keep them safe, so we provided a safe environment, which also minimized any possible disruption to the educational environment. And then it went on just to say, if you have questions or concerns about the gathering or your student needs extra support in coping with the current news and events, please feel free to reach out to an RHS building administrator. And that was signed off on by Principal Josh Wrinkle and myself. So there's been a lot of comments made about this already, but one I want to address is that building administrators are left to deal with this on their own. That certainly didn't happen in this case. Principal Wrinkle was reached out to Neil DeLuca, who's his immediate supervisor, who reached out to me. And I believe that they took the right steps in handling this. I really do. And so I support what they did and how they did it. We have a secondary administrators meeting coming up here within the next week or so, at which time we'll sit down and see if there's lessons to be learned from this particular occurrence and just talk collectively about how we may handle these issues going forward so that we can ensure consistency among our students. I want to be clear too, though, that again, these students approached this in a very peaceful manner. They didn't say or do anything inflammatory. We reserve the right, of course, in any of these situations, if students go too far, right, and they use language that the language in and of itself is a breach of the code of conduct, they are disrupting the educational environment, any of those things, we will apply the code of conduct as appropriate. So I want to be very clear about that. I think the only other point in terms of things that were talked about at this meeting, I want to join in too. The notion that we don't want to hear from parents and community members is false. We do. I think that's evident from the numerous opportunities we give people to weigh in, not only at public board meetings, but through the numerous surveys we've done, are continuing to do. And the Talk to RCS and Ask the Board features on the website as well Again, I sometimes have the opportunity to provide a perspective, having worked in numerous other districts too. I've seen those features utilized more in this district than I've seen anyplace else, and that's a good thing. People are not shy, apparently, about speaking up and reaching out and letting us know what they think. So I believe we've heard from people already on the topic of early literacy, but by all means, if there are those who still want to weigh in with additional questions or concerns, want us to consider those and potentially address those at the study session that's coming up in January, please take advantage of that opportunity. And then the only other thing that I'll mention is, again, so it's December 11th, we're approaching the holidays and we're approaching a break in the action. So I want to express my great appreciation. When we hit these milestones, a lot of hard work went into preparing to start the school year, and then since our students came back and staff members, and from late August, early September till now, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears has gone into providing students with what they need to have a great educational experience in Rochester schools, which I believe they get. So for all of those who have contributed to what I would characterize as a very successful kind of first stretch of this school year going into this first break, we appreciate you greatly, and we're glad that you have this well-earned break coming up. We hope for anybody that's got the opportunity to enjoy a little bit of time off, whatever's going to make you happy and fulfilled during that time, we hope you do it. And we know when you come back, we're going to hit the ground running, and we're back at it again in January. So we'll miss you when you're gone, but we'll look forward to everybody's return come January. And I want to apply that to students as well. We've got a lot of hardworking kids in this district, highly engaged, fantastic students. I'm sure this break is very welcome for them as well. So we hope that our students are able to relax, enjoy, and take full advantage of this opportunity to kind of relax, unwind, and be ready to come back and dive back into robust learning when they return to us in January. Thank you.
Thank you. Continuing on in the agenda, item 11, which is announcements. December 18th, we're going to have a board special meeting at 6 p.m. located here at West Middle School. On December 22nd, that is the beginning of our winter holiday recess. It begins at the end of the day. And on January 8th, classes resume. On January 15th, there is no school for Martin Luther King Jr.'s holiday. And then on January 16th, we're going to have a board regular meeting, and that is also an organizational meeting at 6 p.m. at Brooklands Elementary. Item 12 is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? So moved by Trustee Gupta. Do I have a second? So moved by Trustee Blake. All those in favor? Aye. That's a 6-0 vote. Thank you, and enjoy your night.